Just warn you guys ahead of time, I am recording this. My hope is to put this up onto our CVFL.org website so that anybody who could not make it today can still benefit from what we're talking about. And all the resources that we're going to go over today will also be on the website as well. Okay. Let's hear. Also, do me just some small courtesies. Please make sure mics are on mute until you go to speak, just because we all are in different situations. And I will pre-warn you, I have a 19-year-old cat that occasionally when she wakes up, she likes to yell to let me know she's awake. So if, if I have to pause real quick to go get her to be quiet, humor me on that one. My school is not open on the weekends, or I probably would have done it there. Let's see here. So give me just a moment to pull up our agenda. And did everybody get the agenda? Let me ask you that. Did everybody see the agenda? I can go on to that really quick and show you guys. Give me just a moment. So our agenda for today, let me just make this larger. Our agenda for today is, that's the actual debate. Hold on. 2 seconds. As you can see, I've got a lot of resources on the screen here. Give me just a moment. And there are still people coming in. Okay. So our agenda, it looks like a lot, but it's going to kind of move fast, guys. The idea is we're going to go over what basic judging even is before we get into any event. So you guys understand your role within the league. And then we're going to go into how to create tab room accounts, which is an essential for judging. We absolutely have to have that this time. And then we're going to go into how to actually fill out a ballot, both like technically, like how would a person do that, but also what are the ways of doing it in a quality way that will help the students. We will take a brief break after that because it will be a lot to kind of digest at once. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go into the individual events. And that will be so that you have some basics before going into a tournament. Our tournament on next Saturday is the debate tournament. So we'll quickly go over speech and we'll make sure we go over all of these different types of events. Our goal this time is to not overwhelm you with all of the small details, but show you where you can find the resources for the small details and make sure you just have a working concept of what that is. And we'll leave it open for kind of some final touches of judging and then some open questions, because I'm sure there will be some. What I will also, the reason I wanted you all to know about the chat link was that I'm going to be dropping in some resources there as well. So if you haven't, please take a second and find that. And that way, when we get there, I can start dropping in some stuff. And then if you're on a computer, this will allow you to save those links right into your bookmarks, download them as you need to, etc. So give me just a second here. Now, there is this judge's training book. Can everybody see that on my screen right now? It should have like the screen you should see should say index. If you guys see just in the chat, somebody or a couple people give me some yeses or some nos to make sure I'm thinking I'm sending the right thing. Thank you guys so much. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to send in the chat the link for this judge's book, and let me just drop that in there right now to everyone. So in the chat is a link that should take you to Google Drive, our league Google Drive, where it will give you a PDF that you can download. This PDF will eventually be changing. I know that there's some stuff in assembling this that we have not covered for this season, no matter how many times we've looked at it. And because it's put together in between the hours of teaching and the rest of our lives, I'm sure there are a typo or two. If you find one, be polite, let me know about it, and let me fix it. But if you've been able to successfully grab it, could you please put the word just like got it in the chat, the phrase got it, just so I know somebody got it? Thank you, Stephanie. I appreciate you. Thank you, Ram. Good, guys. Again, just wanting to make sure that what I think is happening is happening. So it's quite a long document, and my goal is to kind of navigate you guys through some of it rather quickly. So let's go ahead and let me let these last people into from the lobby, and we'll get started. You will be at a bit of a disadvantage if you are on a phone, but I'm going to try to narrate what we're doing anyway, and then know that this link will be available to all coaches. So if you know a parent that's not here today and you're like, oh, they should get this, it is updated. So right now, the first part I would like to get through on the agenda is just really letting you know the need for judges. We actually need judges in some cases more than we need contestants. The students are preparing every single week for, in their practices and their classes. But in the end, what they need to do is have somebody see them. Art has no purpose if not for an audience, right? Without reacting, art does not really exist. That's at least my opinion. And I feel the same way with speech and debate. If we don't have people saying, hey, yeah, you were able to persuade me, or I could feel what you were trying to get me to feel, I think that the debate goes well. There's a question in the chat here. We will be using Zoom for the tournaments. So that was a good question right away. The platform I'm having you do today is WebEx. That has been my favorite pet since before COVID. And once COVID caused the shutdown of the schools in my school district, I went straight to WebEx because it was secure. And then when we had the Zoom bombing going on, if you guys can reflect fondly back to that last spring, I did not have to worry about Zoom bombing when that happened. So that's just kind of always been my choice. And with us using Tab Room and Zoom potentially in future trainings, I want to keep this separate. My students also use Zoom for their speech and debate practices right now. So the way it works for our tournaments, guys, for judging is when you are going to judge, we're going to ask that you have all day available. That could be not such a big deal, I think, when we had physical tournaments, when you would have to drive to a school, because if you're going to Ponderosa and you're from Davis, you're probably not going to turn around and go home, just have to come back and pick up your student. But online, it is important because in our own houses, we have things that would distract us. We have maybe other kids living with us. We have just our own microwaves, kitchens that we want to do stuff in. So just know that it is an all-day event, and you will get notifications when you're going to be judging, but it is all day. You can make arrangements with your coaches if that's an issue. But generally speaking, just know that it's going to be like an all-day commitment. And then we don't use you every round. So it's very common that people will ask me, oh, I didn't get a ballot this round. Will that mean that I'm not going to be used today? And the answer is absolutely not. What we need is we want to make sure that when we have judges, we have a judge that is being matched with competitors that they have no horse in the race or vested interest in the outcome. So when you get assigned, if you are from St. Francis, you are going to get assigned to a team, maybe Mariloma versus Oak Ridge. So that way you don't really care which team wins. You're looking for the best competitor. And that is why we need everybody from every team. There are some teams that are larger than others, and we want to make sure that we have enough judges without any conflict of interest. And that's why we need everybody. In fact, if you're from a smaller school, we almost need you more. Deanna Lopez just asked me, can I email the handbook? Not a problem. I can email that, but what I'm going to do, Deanna, is I'm going to email it to all of the coaches, and then the coaches can, from there, pass it down to all of the parents and students, okay? I just don't have everybody's email addresses in our league for that. And if there is a parent that knows Deanna, Deanna, what team are you from?
I'm from Miraloma.
Oh, Deanna, then we should know it. Ion, who is our VP, is in this meeting. Ion, maybe look for Deanna and try to email her that while we're talking.
Yep, I'm on that right now.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. Let me just. Okay, so I'm just letting some people in the lobby, guys, every so often. I apologize. So it doesn't matter if you're a veteran judge. You might hear that term before. A veteran judge we call sometimes a flow judge. If we're talking about debate, it means that you usually, through experience, have done this before. You can listen to a speech where the students are speaking a little faster, or a debate where the students are speaking a little faster, and you can still keep notes. You might hear another term called lay judge, which just means that you are newer and would want students to naturally speak a little slower and are learning a lot of the rules as you go. So it doesn't matter if you are a veteran judge or if you are a lay judge. We want everybody, and then we will always try, whenever there is more than one panel, if we have an event where there needs to be 3 judges, we will try to put you with a mixture of judges so that there are flow judges and lay judges in the same group. Okay, so what you need to know about some judging. We're going to go through this skinny part right here. This is the bare bones stuff that I want you to know if you're in the right spot or eligible. First, you are the second most important role. So if you need a little ego bump, guys, go for that. We literally do need you. The commitment is, I said, all day. You need to be 1 year removed from graduating high school. So when a student says, Mom, Dad, I want to join speech and debate, and you're like, oh, that's amazing. That'll really help your presentation skills, or you're going to be a much better student because of it. Or great, I wanted you to be the president, and now you're starting that good work. Yeah, I may not have told you about the judging commitment. And like, oh yeah, by the way, that means you're giving up 12 Saturdays this year. And you're like, wait, what? I'm already giving up college money. Why do I have to do this too? That may be your experience. You don't have to be the only person that judges and represents your student. Your student can be anybody who is properly acquainted with them that is 1 year removed from high school. So you can juggle this responsibility between you and a spouse or partner. You can have grandma and grandpa jump in. You can have an enthusiastic aunt or uncle, a family friend, even an older sibling. So if you've got one kid in high school and one kid in college, and that kid in college is hanging around the house and you were expecting them to go to the dorms, you didn't want them to go because they had COVID, but you're like, be useful, make them judge. So it can be anybody. And this allows parents, guardians, some flexibility to say that I'm not having to give up every time it rotates. And that way you can enjoy it as well. In my team, because from Araloma, because we are a larger team, generally speaking, when a student signs up for a tournament, we tell them to submit the name of a judge if their judge is needed, if they need to give one. And that is what I'd want you to be prepared for, just to be fair. Now, in our team, it's only 1 out of every 3 students that actually needs to commit to a judge. That is for my team. So what happens, I've got many parents who both are involved and invested in their students, but they alternate. They're like, oh, honey, it's your turn. I did it last time. Right. And the commitment, again, would be all day, but all day generally means that we start a tournament, if we're live, from about 8 o'clock. And then when we say 5 o'clock, we lie every single time. It's never 5. We say 5 because the last rounds wrap up around then. And then depending upon how things go, we usually do like an awards assembly around 6. Now that they're online, we're anticipating they will actually be a little faster because we're not waiting for all these ballots. Because we're going to be using the tab room program where parents and guardians can fill out their information quicker. We're expecting that ballots will get turned in right away, and that we'll be able to keep it to where about every hour and a half or so, we have new rounds coming out, which should put us done about 5 to answer that question of an all-day commitment. So I have a question that says, what happens if your student is not available on a Saturday? If your student is not available, they don't have to register for that tournament. So the tournaments are not required to attend unless your individual coach has said so. But most of the people I know of, I'm hoping I'm not speaking out of pocket, we don't require students to compete at every tournament. We understand students have commitments and lives. And so we have 3 tournaments that are set aside just for speech and 3 tournaments that are set aside just for debate. So it is rare that your student would feel the necessity to be at every tournament because they rarely feel like they are going to be at every event. So right now, the one coming up this Saturday is a debate tournament. And if your student is a speech student, then they probably are not going to register for this event. Okay. Now, so an example right now, again, of a student would usually need to check in around 7:38 with their coach, log in to the platform, and be available through the day till about 5 o'clock. We're getting a feel for how much faster or slower online will work as we go to do our first tournament. This part is new for all of us. Next, a judge does need to have, though, a functional ability to speak English and listen to English and understand it. So we've had occasionally where students will offer up their parent, and their parent is a second language learner of English, and they do not feel like they can understand the vocabulary sometimes used when in like Lincoln Douglas or public forum. So if you feel that is you, ask your student to potentially find another replacement. There again is an entire community that can be pulled from. And right now what we find is, like for Mara Loma, and I know for other teams, we have a lot of college students who are home who have expressed interest in wanting to help judge because they're at home and are missing that extra purpose right now. So you can tap into previously graduated students and siblings. I know that last year we had a couple of parents who literally tapped their college students once they found out it didn't have to be a parent. So hopefully that makes things a little more flexible. Again, you need to have no experience to be a judge. In some ways, not having experience is great because it means that when you are hearing these debates and you have maybe only heard a few rounds or no rounds before, it means that you are going to have an instinct for what was persuasive and what you felt was convincing. And it often means that you're not going to come with any type of ego, right? Which is great. That way you're there to listen for what is actually said. You will need to create a Tab Room account. It's called tabroom.com. It is completely free. We're going to go over those steps in a few minutes, but I'm not necessarily going to wait for everybody to make a Tab Room account because we all handle technology differently. And some of us can get it done in 3 minutes, and some of us it can take half an hour. And I don't want to have that distract. I'm already thankful that you guys are taking this time on a Saturday. To me, I will let everybody figure out this individually. If you can do it while I'm talking, that's amazing. I just can't field out questions probably until the end about Tab Room. You need to also be in a space where there's Wi-Fi. Can't stress that enough. This is completely online. So if you are, this is the part where it's a little frustrating for some people. If you're in an area where Wi-Fi is dodgy, you may have to go find a place that you can camp out. I know I've got some very rural parents and the internet's dodgy. My own brother lives in a place where it's really hard to get Wi-Fi. If he was going to judge, he would have to drive about 15 minutes down the road to get to good Wi-Fi. So that may be part of your Saturday consideration, is knowing that you're going to head over to your workspace or a friend's house or a Starbucks and sit outside, right? So just making sure that happens. If you're not chosen for a round, it means you got a break, right? But it does mean we're probably going to need you later. In fact, the further we go in a tournament, if you were not used, the more we actually need you. So for me, when I was the last thing I judged was for nationals, and I wasn't needed for one round, I was like, yay. I literally just turned on the TV, kind of watched some YouTube videos, rotated laundry. And then sure enough, I was needed for the next round. And when I didn't get selected for my final round, bonus, I got the rest of the day off. So just tell yourself it is all day, and that way you can make time. I'm also going to ask you to let people know if you're in a home and you've got multiple people living with you, maybe let them know you could be judging. That way they know that if you shut the doors to your office or your bedroom, that don't not come knocking on the door because you're judging around. So just make sure that everyone knows. I've also asked that competitors do the same thing. Make sure they know if they have siblings or a family living with them. And then here's the last part. And this one is in some ways duh, but I do want to make sure I say it. Judges need to be able to set aside virtually every bias you could ever have. So the obvious ones that I think for any public event are gender, race, culture, ethnicity, and sexual orientation. That you should be listening to the students for what they're presenting and how they're presenting it, and doing your best to forget everything else about them so that you're focusing on what they're there to do, which is to debate or present a speech. And we'll kind of go to those implicit biases later, but here's the other bias that I want to bring up. These students are high school students, and they're going to be given topics that, frankly, I wish were discussed at our last debate. They're going to be given things like, hey, how would healthcare actually work if we were to use it? How would, should college basketball players be paid? And what's the impact of that on college? And they're going to talk about these issues, or they could be talking about the Green New Deal, debating the values and attributes of it. You may come to it with your own political belief, but they're not there to argue politics. They're there to argue the policy. So they're not trying to be Democrat or Green Party or liberal or conservative. They're trying to talk about the topic, and often they're not even given the choice about whether they're pro or for it. That's their job, is to show how good they are, that they can win in an event maybe they don't even agree with. But they also don't need to battle our bias about whether we believe that could happen or that it's even possible. We see this also when we have like nuclear debates. We've actually had people who work with nuclear energy, and then they get chosen for a debate about nuclear energy, and they have a hard time setting aside their own experience. And so I would want you to try to set that aside. That's the other bias that we have, is our own politics, our own value system. And really just try to get to what the students are presenting. So if you feel that this is you, that you can do all of these basics about judging, then we feel that you are going to be the right person. Okay. Pausing just for a visual real quick. When you're judging, you're going to hear a lot of acronyms. And I just feel that it's important to have a quick visual. We are the Capital Valley Forensics League. And I'm just made aware of the last day, I keep thinking it's the wrong capital. I'm thinking it's the capital of Sacramento. It's capital like the building. So just so you know, there are 5 major leagues in California. Ours is kind of that gray one right here. We're a very large area. And it goes to like out towards the Davis area. It goes up into the foothills of El Dorado County, into Placer County. So we have a lot of schools, and we have actually added a lot of schools this year as high schools are scrambling for things for students to do that will enrich their lives. So that's what you'll hear, CVFL. It's the Capital Valley Forensics League, and that's referring to our individual league. Of course, we are part of California. So you'll hear CHSSA, CHSSA. That's the California High School Speech Association. And they are kind of our larger state body, and we follow the vast majority of their rules so that our students do not experience a difference when they go to a state tournament. But we also want to make sure everything we do makes our students eligible. And we have similar events. There is a state championship tournament every year that usually takes place in April. And for a lot of students, that becomes a goal. For some students, it's their goal right away. And for some, it's a goal that they become aware of and want to go to. It was announced, just as a heads up, that this year's tournament will be online. We were very bummed to hear last year when it got canceled. They had not been able to so quickly transition to an online tournament with just a few weeks between the shutdown of the state and the state tournament. So this year, they're just doing it online. Whether or not we get a vaccine, whether or not COVID is gone, we will compete online, which in some ways should be, I think, increased participation. These tournaments can be anywhere in the state for the state championship. And so this means we don't have to worry about travel or those expenses. So that was something to look forward to in April. Our team, Mariloma, and a lot of our league participates in the NCFL, the National Catholic Forensics League. Now, you do not need to be Catholic to be a part of this league. It is an additional speech and debate national organization that so many students like to participate in because our diocese is different than our league. And the students, once they get their footing in how to perform their event and they've improved themselves, they've improved their performances, they often want to figure out how to keep growing. So getting additional competition outside of our league really does let them see how the competition works nationwide. So participating at the NCFL tournament in January lets them compete with many Bay Area teams, lets them get, it's cheaper than going to some of these larger Berkeley and Stanford invitationals. And there is a national tournament for that. It varies year to year where the location is. And then, of course, we have the national speech and debate, which teams are a member of. So then that is nationally somewhere else every year. And the students want to go to that. But unlike sports, like, volleyball or basketball, you don't ascend through states to nationals. In speech and debate, you qualify for those separately. So we could have a student who did not qualify to a state tournament qualify to go to nationals. And that's unique. And I actually think that's neat. So if your students are going to compete and you're going to be judging at these tournaments, yeah, you would need access to 2 computers and 2 different quiet spaces. Because you could be listening to a round in one room and they're speaking loudly in another. So the kids generally, Teresa just asked, when the kids are debating, are they standing or sitting? For a lot of the debate, they're sitting because you can only see them from chest up anyway. And for speech, a lot of our speeches are going to be pre-recorded and uploaded. So you'll be watching something that has already been filmed where those students are standing. That's the expectation for most of the speeches. Most. Well, that's why we're going to break down some of the events tree. So that's a very good question. I appreciate that. And so thank you for asking. And that's kind of the setups, right? Is that we need to know that as these students are competing, what to expect. Now, I did put into our guide tournaments, and I have an online version section and what invitationals are. So when we say tournaments, like league tournaments, we mean where it's just our league versus our league. And when we say invitational, what we mean is outside of our league. It could be state invitationals, national invitationals. There was a Yale tournament. Gosh, that one's just happening. There was one a couple weeks ago, and that was in Kentucky, and it was everyone in the country participating at that. So Joey says, do we need to have our videos on? I think your videos need to be on. The students should know that you're paying attention. That actually was a huge concern at different online invitationals, is whether or not the judge is even listening or paying attention. So your video shows them that you are listening. Now, you can be looking down and writing, but you can see you presently in front of the screen. So it would be best practice to have your video turned on. Now, here's the deal. If you're in an area where having a student on Wi-Fi and you on Wi-Fi with both your video on is going to create some latency, some skipping in the video because your bandwidth is being constricted, it is okay to tell the contestants that, hey, to make sure the internet is stable in my home, I'm going to turn my video off in just a moment, but at least your video could be on when you first are starting tab, let them know that, and then turn it off. That is something I've seen with already having to happen in homes with students where there's like 3 students doing Zoom meetings all at the same time. And yeah, turning off your camera does help preserve your bandwidth. So these are good questions, guys. I appreciate them. So again, an invitation will be something like if you ever hear students say they want to compete at the Berkeley tournament or University of the Pacific, these are outside our league. With that, there's always additional cost. Our league tournaments are very inexpensive, and I think that really helps all schools be able to participate. But invitationals vary in price. So the University of the Pacific usually is like $30, $40 for some events. Whereas Berkeley's like over 100 for an event. Some of that's because of the popularity or the prestige of competing at that tournament. So you do want to make sure before your student signs up for these invitationals that you know what you're getting into financially. Good news, there's no transportation costs this year. That used to be such a consideration, right? When you had to think about going to a tournament like Stanford, was driving down there, taking 3 hours, and then needing to have a hotel, and then wondering if you need to stay an extra night or not, and there's Uber and Lyft fees. Right now, invitationals, my team is really excited about this. If they're able to sign up for tournaments outside of our league that they would normally not be able to do because of the travel costs and the travel restrictions. So they are able to compete in Boston and Chicago while sitting in their homes. And those invitationals, though, I need you to know, have an additional commitment on judging. So while the vast majority of everything I'm going to tell you applies, these commitments are often Saturday, Sunday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So also make sure that your student is not convincing you to do something that you're not prepared to do. So before I move on to how to create a tab room account so that you can judge, are there any questions about what I've discussed so far? Okay, it looks like we're good. If you still have it, go ahead and feel free to ask. Now, what I need to make sure you've done is create a tab room account. So anybody who's a veteran judge has already done this. But if you haven't, it's very simple web address, www.tabroom.com. And you're going to log in or sign up. If you are new, you're going to sign up. And you're going to end up with a screen that looks very similar to this. It's going to say non-SDA members. So if you're not a coach, create a tab room account. And you'll simply put in your email address, your, any information. I don't give my middle name out just because I don't. So you don't need to put that. Notice that's not required. A phone number and the landline. I have people ask me, why do they want why they want to know my cell phone provider? Tab Room is a really neat program that can send you text messages letting you know when you've been selected for a judge. So if you're at an invitational and you do need to judge at invitationals, you'll get picked, you'll get chosen just like you would for a league tournament. You may be like, okay, great. I've got all weekend, but I've got a house to run. So you can be in the kitchen, like preparing lunch and whatever. And then you'll get a text message saying, you've been selected for the round starting at 1. That lets you know you've got like half an hour to wrap up what you're doing and go grab your judging ballot. So putting in your phone number allows us to communicate with you other than your email, and allows invitationals down the road to do the same. So it's really important that you put that there. And I'm not sure why they want to know cell providers anymore. It's a question they ask. And let's see here. So just make sure you write that down. Now, here's a best practice. I'm going to suggest you do not use a work email. If you don't have one, create your own Gmail account, because we've had parents who maybe it's been 3 months since they've been asked to judge, and all of a sudden they can't remember their password, and then they go to reset it and it was a work email, but they don't have access to the work email today, or the work server is down or under maintenance. And it creates a huge problem and stress for you. And at invitationals, you get fined when you miss rounds. So if you commit to a tournament on, again, invitationals, and you don't show up for that round, you get slapped with a $50 or $100 fine for not showing up. And you're like, I didn't, my email, I couldn't get to my email. So please try to use a personal email account when signing up for Tab Room, okay? And then you'll see this screen. I'm just trying to show you what to expect if you haven't done it. Or if you're like, oh, I'm signing up my partner or spouse because I'm not doing all this judging this year. So then you would pick, are you, if you've already been associated with a team, then you can link with that team. If you're a judge, you link your account. If you're a competitor, you link your account. So if your student hasn't made one, they do need to make one. All of our tournaments used to be on a program called joyoftournaments.com, but now we're using Tab Room. So we have a lot of students who have never had to make a Tab Room account because it's for nationals or invitationals. Not every team in our league goes to invitationals. So this is new for a lot of people. And so if you find that this is frustrating or an issue, great time to reach out to your coach, and maybe your coach needs to put something out. But I'm going to put this, again, it's in your manual, to try to show you what you need to do. Now, once you've created a tab room account, you'll see it. I have my school up here. It says Mariloma High School, and I can see what my school signed up for. So we did a practice tournament last weekend that coaches and students helped with. Here's the Yale Invitational that was on the 25th. You can see we've already signed up for some stuff, right? So you'll be able to see what you may have been already committed to or what you're eligible for. But you'll also see a list of tournaments that students can sign up for. And so if you've got that really firebrand competitor student, maybe have some conversations about what's fair. Like sometimes like one tournament a month or one tournament, 2 tournaments a month, whatever. Because right now I've got students where if it wasn't for restraint, they would be trying to sign up for a tournament every weekend. And that may be more than you're prepared to do or you think is fair or that, their allowance pays for. So that's what it would look like to see the screen, and that will help you see what's coming up. When you select the tournament you're in, and most of you may not see this yet because unless your school's really on it, you may not have any judging assignments yet. So if you don't see this part, don't worry. But once you click the tournament you're going to judge in, like the practice tournament last weekend, you're going to see some links. Everyone should see this right here. These links that say Student Lounge, Judges Lounge, Tab Room. I would want you to click on the Judges Lounge. And what that will do is it'll put you into a Zoom room with all the other judges. And then I'm going to come in to that lounge before a tournament. And I'm going to make sure that everybody's locked and loaded about what events we're doing, what to focus on in those events, go over some tips and troubleshooting. It's also where you can hang out if you're having any issues or need to talk. So you only judge at tournaments your student is entered in. Absolutely, Jennifer. Good question. That would be cruel and unusual, right? To make you judge at tournaments your kid's not that just because the team's at it. Any other one-offs would be a deal you made with your coach or something, right? I have had parents where they like, oh my God, I have to cancel last minute, but I'll judge the next tournament even if my kid's not there. That's just them trying to be fair. So most of the time, 99% of the time, yes, Jennifer, you only judge at tournaments your students entered in if you get picked. Now on my team, we send out a judge assignment email, usually about a week and a half to 2 weeks before the tournament, letting you know you've been selected. And if your name wasn't on the list, you got the weekend off. Okay, so every team does it a little different. Nevin, are you a parent for a Mariloma student? Nevin has a question saying they got the wrong school. They got a middle school. And so what will happen here is once you get selected for judging, you'll be reassigned to Mariloma. That's actually something I do as a coach. When we go into the account and you get assigned, because the last time you participated was your middle school, you'll get added to the Mariloma tournament. Okay, that should happen this coming weekend. How soon should you get a judge's announcement prior to a tournament? Again, the best practice is most teams will tell you a week before. So a lot of you should be receiving emails from your teams, captains, presidents, coaches this weekend, letting you know if you've been selected. I know that our VP sends stuff out on Sundays to let parents know. And then when we do our weekly practice, if a student's parent has not confirmed, we then ask that student to confirm or find another judge. So that should mean that if you come the end of this weekend, if you haven't been told you're judging, there is a really good chance you're not judging this first tournament. Okay. Now you'll see that when you're looking at these tabs, it will also have the website. We try to put a lot of our information on the website. It's a kind of a faux website. But the Judges Lounge is where we'd like you to click on when you first get to the tournament. It lets us know you're there. Your coach will see you there. Again, I get to go over the basics to make sure everyone's ready to go. Generally speaking, if you have already had a tab room account, you don't need to link it. If you're new, if you can't, going back to the slide here, where it says link your account, If you're about to judge, it should be able to find the school. If it doesn't, your school will take care of that. Good question. Now, here's the tricky part. We're using Tab Room because CVFL has partnered with a company called Classrooms.Cloud, which is run by the NSDA. And this is an example. They create virtual Zoom meetings for each event. So I want you to like a private Zoom with just the competitors and you. So there's a room for the judges lounge, a room for the students to go to, prep rooms. So if the tournament has prep rooms, you will go there. So Congress will generally have its own room for Congress students to go to. Parley Prep would go there, Extent Prep would go. And so you'll get told, oh, you're in CVFL 105, and you'll click enter. You'll have the password. Tab Room will give you that unique password just for you. And when you get in there, you will see sometimes nobody just yet. It'd be like if you were early to this meeting, right? You would be the first person in the room. Then the students will come in to that room. But that's what this screen looks like, and that's why I've included it. You'll see here as an example, I had one student who had joined, and there's me. Sorry, two. Sorry, there's two, and there's me. You'll see there's this window here where you can communicate right with Tab. If you've been a veteran judge, tell me this isn't amazing. That you could actually put in your information and tell Tab, like, hey, we only have one competitor in our room. It's been 10 minutes. Are they here today? Sometimes kids are sick. Sometimes having technology issues. Or if you're just needing help, right? You can let us know, and then Tab Room can jump in and try to help. But I love that new feature is there so that you can get support. And when we were physically at tournaments, it was always frustrating when a door was locked, right? And I had to give you my number to text me and all that. Now you can go directly to Tab. This is why we're going to bring up the Remind app. CVFL, our students in their committee called the Student Advocate Committee said, oh, it would do us so much better if we had a Remind app. Remind is an app that does text messages to a closed group over Wi-Fi. It's absolutely free. And I'm going to ask you guys to take a second, and if you can, please join that. I'm going to highlight it in blue right now. You go into your text message, and you type in 81010 like you would Target, and then you would type in at CVFLJ, and you'll join the group. And that way, you also have direct line to me. My job at these tournaments is to make sure they're running well. And any problems, if you're having technical issues, you're running late, you don't have a contestant, Tab Room's not responding, anything, let me know. If you are a freshman parent, thank you. Thank you for I'll fix that. Making notes as we go. Give me just a second here. So if you're a freshman judge, you know eventually we're going to be meeting in the flesh again, right? We'll have live tournaments at some point, and this is going to keep going. So when we're at these invitationals, I'm still the league president. You can still contact me. When we're at our league tournaments and you can't find a room, you can use this. So please join that Remind. If you haven't, I've already got a bunch of parents who did. I'm going to take a quick breather, though, let you join if you want, and just give you a moment.
Hey Joshua, sorry I'm a little late.
Okay.
Can you guide me where this text option is in Tab Room?
I'm sorry, say it one more time.
Can you show me where the text option is? Where do I go on the Tab Room to get into? I'm logged in, but I don't know. I'm not finding where you are asking me to get into for the text option.
Okay, so two things. So the Tab Room messaging is only when we're in a tournament. So that's why you can't see it. Yeah. And then this Remind app is for anytime, anything.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, so this is outside of that, because what if you can't even get into Tab Room? What if there's a problem and you really need to let me know?
Okay.
Yeah. When I have been at invitationals myself, it can be so frustrating to try to communicate with Tab because it takes them forever to respond. And if you're late to something, time matters and it stresses you out. So having this as an option could really help. So again, I've got a couple questions I am going to go through. It says, if you don't see your school signed up for an upcoming debate tournament, does that mean they're not participating or do you have time to enroll? I think we're locking out this Sunday. So if you don't see your school, get in contact with your coach like right away and find out. Maybe they're entering them in this weekend. And let your problem be known to them. They could just be slow. We just got all the tournaments up for the league, so some coaches may have looked last weekend and it wasn't ready. Now they're going to do it this weekend. Do judges' videos need to be on or off? Again, I'll say that probably several times throughout this. I would prefer your camera on. The students would like to know that you are paying attention. It is when you're physically in the room, it's easy to tell they've got your focus. But they don't know if you're secretly watching CNN with closed captions on or are you paying attention to their debate. And feedback is one of the most important things for them. And so I think it's best to have it on. If it affects your Wi-Fi, start off with your camera, let them know that you're paying attention and that you're turning it off to save your Wi-Fi, okay? That is the protocol I'd like you to follow. So yes, you can't find the judges room and tab room until you've been assigned to be a judge. That is live for each tournament. There is also a Remind app. So if you download the Remind app, which is free from the Google Play or iTunes, that will use your Wi-Fi to message and not your data. So another question says, since last fall, Jen, check for updates or check a different browser. Sometimes Tab Room has some glitches. If you check the Chrome check the Chrome browser and try to go to Tab Room and see if that's it.
I was trying on the app, the Tab Room app.
Oh, I've never used the Tab Room app. Interesting.
Yeah, there's an app for it too, but okay.
Yeah.
I'll just try it through my browser then.
You know what? Thank you for teaching me they have an app. I honestly did not even know because just as a coach, I need the full like display board. So thank you for telling me. I never knew.
Oh, yeah, you're welcome. Hope it works for you.
Yeah, I'm gonna put that add it to this after I experiment with it myself and get out to my parents. So again, guys, next thing, please don't judge on your phones, but apps on iPads, glorious. The reason why is that the feedback that we're about to cover right now is so important to the students. And I find that when parents have Tab Room, they are often more verbose with their feedback because they can type faster than they can write. And that is great. But if you're on a phone, it's so tedious to type that the feedback shortens. And when you're on an iPad or a computer, you don't seem to have the same burden. So if you can, be on a computer, be on an iPad, and use that. If you have to be on a phone, hey, that is what it is. You are adults, and you know what is best for you and what you can do. I'm not here to tell you that part. I'm just asking you that when possible, please be on a larger device because of your typing. So in the PDF, there's a lot of stuff we're going to go over feedback, and I'm going to try to keep us on time. I'm going to go over what's called a feedback spectrum. There's a link for feedback examples, and then there's so many resources about judging. And we're not going to cover all of those because I want to be respectful of time. And we have, again, a mixed population of veteran judges and lay judges, and I will let you fill in as you need to. For some of you, this is going to make you want to really explore speech and debate, and some of you have already done that exploration. So, filling out ballots. This page on page 11 is for live tournaments only. So we're going to skip right past it. But I do want to talk about feedback. So I have a quick little thing here about judges' comments in speech events. What we're going to talk about in a moment is called a feedback spectrum. So where you say things like good eye contact, right? That's constructive. To say you really seem to visually engage the audience. So that's positive, but you want to make sure you're not being vague. So I'm going to go to this little hold on, where's my chart? Did I not include it here? I did not. Give me just a moment. Let's see. Give me just a moment to make sure I load my own work. Okay, here we go. So what I like to use as a visual is a feedback chart, just to kind of explain it. I don't actually use this, guys. I want to be clear. And what I would want you to see is that everything north here is positive, right? Everything south is negative. And that's not the problem. Not every speech is going to go well. Not every debate's going to go well. So your feedback doesn't need to be positive. What your feedback needs to be is honest and specific. So that's the other part here. Vague to specific is what I really want to talk about. When we look at the feedback that judges will give, whether it's positive or negative, there's still higher and low quality. You could say something like, wow, you are amazing. And that is not good feedback, even though it's positive, and I'm sure they were amazing. So what we want you to say is what they did that's going to help them repeat that thing that was amazing. So here, your speech modulated between slow and intense moments, and it made your speech really build to a climax. They can do that again. That might help them be successful. Things that have nothing to do with speech. I love your outfit, your speech, all of it. It's like, well, that's cool because they did dress to like make sure they look professional, but you know that's not what they were trying to do. So making sure that you give them things that are not just like good job. It's positive. I know we want to give that, but we want you to be specific. So even if the person lost, this is still good positive feedback. It was clear you forgot something, but remain calm and continued. Your speech was still well presented. Great. They can do that again. Even if they lost, that's still positive feedback that they didn't stress out. Negative stuff, right? This was just bad. You are going to watch some bad speeches. I'm going to be honest. There's just people who are working on it. That's why they're joining speech and debate. They're not trying to get a national trophy. They're trying to get good at public speaking. And they're going to struggle. But don't be mean whenever you can. This was just bad. Try to be encouraging even when it's negative, right? So if you're like, yeah, I noticed that you stopped like 5 times because you forgot. Just practice your speech more. It'll get to you. Keep going. Instead of saying things like blah, we've seen these things, sadly. You can, maybe that was more like the person was coming across tired or bored of their own speech, right? Letting them know that. I have given feedback like you're presenting a speech that is about somebody who's angry, and I did not believe you've ever been angry. Get in touch with what angry is like, right? So you can give them feedback that is constructive, even when it's negative or positive. But that is the real part of this. The students are needing feedback. They are starving for it. They practice all this time so that they can do well. And when they don't do as well as they expected, they want to know what can they do. And you're the adult. You know what good speech is. You know what good reputation is. So they want to get it from you. And I've had students who really it has just messed up their day to get vague feedback. So please make sure that you are giving as specific as you can. I have another document called The Good, Bad, and the Ugly, where we look at some examples for different events, and you can see what the person said and our opinion about why that's a good or bad response. So we have some for Lincoln Douglas, duo interpretation, which is a type of speech, for extemporaneous ballot, for oratory. So maybe reading through these, they're in the document, would be good if you're not comfortable or want examples of feedback. We do something in our team, our league, called the Student Advocates, where the students get together and talk about how are things going in the league. And a lot of it centered on feedback last year. And that was something they really wanted judges to focus on, was giving them very specific things that were related to their event And they were still getting things about shoes and voice. Well, young men can't control if they have deep voices or not, or young ladies can't control if you associate, their passionate speech with your mother yelling at you. Like, so some of the feedback wasn't constructive. And they really would like it if it could be things that focus on their event. That makes them happy. And I think that if you're here and you're wanting to help the students improve, I think that'll help you achieve your goal. The ballots in our tournaments are going to be in tab room, and you're going to be filling those out with that feedback. It's going to ask you to click on who won. If it's a debate, which team won, it's going to ask you to double check that, right? Were they on the affirmative or the negative? Or if you're in speech, it's going to ask you to rank them 1 through 6. Who was the first? Who was the 6th place? And you're going to need to give feedback to each of those 6 students. So what a lot of us will do is we will take paper out and we will make notes as we're listening to the speeches so we can remember what to say when we go to fill out the ballots. The students will get these ballots, all of them. And again, that is something they're looking for right away when the tournament is over. So any questions about ballots? Debbie, yes, I am going to email the guide to the coaches, and the coaches can then disseminate it to the teams. And then someone did ask, do we need to wait to be added as a judge? Yes, that should be happening. Your team should be connecting those judging assignments very shortly. About a third of you should see some action right away because your team is already using you as a judge or is about to be. There are 2 tournaments in October. So that means statistically 66% of you are going to be chosen to judge before the month is over. If your students are involved in invitationals, which mine are, there is like a 90% chance that my judges will get chosen before the month is over. Parents who are, or judges who are, parents who have very prolific students in competition will be asked to judge more often. Students who compete less often, those parents will judge less often. And let's see here. Like where we find. Let's see here. It says, yeah. So again, guys, once you made your tab room account, it should have a list of your team's events, and you should have upcoming. There's a tab right here. See where it says judging upcoming. That should have a spot that tells you what your upcoming events are. So if you're being selected, that should be active for you. Mine looks a little different. I tried to log in as a different account that I made for myself to make sure mine didn't look weird. Mine looks a little different because I'm a coach. But most of the things I'm showing you in this document, you're not going to see till we have a live tournament. But that's why I want you to have the document so you can go in and look at it when you're trying to fill things out. Let's see here, where are we at? Now we're going to take, if you're wondering where we are on the agenda, we're at the quick spot where I say we're going to take a break for a mental health, sanity, and overall morale. We're right on time. So what I'm going to give you guys is please take about, let's say, 5 minutes tops and stretch, get up. Studies show that when you feel gravity, it feels new again. So if you're sitting down, get up, walk around for a second, get some coffee, get a drink. When we come back, we're going to get into the individual events of speech and debate, where some of the things you're looking for in each event are going to be covered, and some of the new rule changes for being online. So if you're a parent who's a veteran, this is where we're going to go over some changes for this year, this online version, okay? So again, guys, at 11:08, let's be back and everybody ready, okay? So take a quick break for mental health. If you've got questions, you can put them in chat and I'll try to answer them. Tell me how you feel. Tell me how you feel. Are you even... Sadly, no, Sarah Beth. We don't have time for DJ. Ooh, my cat is sleeping right now, Ben. So we haven't heard her, which is good. So Joey asks, will it be self-explanatory when you judge the first time in tab room how to put in judge ratings comments? It actually will. It really will. I promise that. There will be after you click on who won. You will see that now in the links. I tried to show you that ahead of time. I'm going to go there really quick. Give me just a moment. So one of the links here provided by Ms. Elko from Wood Creek takes you to the National Speech and Debate from last year, and they're using classroom.cloud. So you'll see like the login process. Theirs is going to be different because it was for nationals. They would set up a little different, but it's similar enough to make you feel comfortable. So you'll see here where it has like the join the meeting, and the same tab room information is available. It goes over, how to make sure you actually have joined the room, the competitor, where you'll hear the speech going from the student. And it goes into, or should, there are several NSDA links on this page. So we go to the National Speech and Debate page that I've also put a link on. There's a document I'm going to be sharing with all the coaches to make sure. This screen you guys see right now actually goes into what different speech and debate events look like and how to fill out ballots. So there's a lot of resources here for that. I can put that link into the chat too. Hold on a second. So when you go to do your first event, let's hear for Jasmine. When you go to your first judging assignment, that should be directed and connected. So we'll take care of that other thing on our end. So Ben asks, well, maybe he didn't want to be told, but I'll still say it. You wanted to know how often do students agree with the judge's decisions? You'd be surprised, actually, how often they agree with the judge's decisions. When I talk to my students and I ask them, like, hey, tell me about your round. How did that round go? They will often tell me, they'll say things like, it went really well. I think if we lost because of X. Or I think we won, and if we won, it's because I did, X and Y. And so they're looking into feedback often to see if that was right, if their instincts for what cost them the case was there. They're speech and debate students are generally very good at being reflective And if they aren't, they become reflective, which is a great and important leadership skill. And through that reflection, I think they're looking for validation that what they're sensing about their own performance and critique is accurate. And so when they do see that they lost and they lost for that reason, like, yep, I felt that. So it's not as common as you think. They're not so soldier mindset or confirmation bias where they're like, I should have won. That judge knows nothing. It actually doesn't come up that often. It does happen, obviously, but not as often as you might think. The students are very good about being reflective. So there is a document I'm going to be sharing out on the CVFL website that has a link to all kinds of videos for judging, just so you guys know. And we'll add some more of these resources. What I did not want to do is overwhelm people, and I could already be doing that. What we're about to do right now is going to be a lot of information rather fast. But here's the neat part. I don't do all the talking here. We have some coaches that are going to help explain some events, and we have some students that are going to come in and help explain some of these events. So I'm going to do a quick overview of speech, but then Sarah Besh, who is one of our speech captains at Mira Loma, is going to talk to you about the humorous, dramatic, thematic interpretation, etc. And then Hugh from Oak Ridge, a coach from there, is going to talk to us about some of our limited prep events. So if you're tired of hearing my voice, that's great. And since CVFL pays me by the word, that means they'll get a discount. First off, individual events. You're going to hear our tournaments are divided into two types. We separate in our league speech events as one type of tournament and debate events as another. And that should let a student be able to focus on their event. Instead, some students want to do both speech and debate. So let's see here. Guys, we had a couple of questions here. So Sarah Besh, I'm going to have you cover the interps, and you can do the originals after Hugh does the limited prep stuff. And Alex asked me, yes, I would want the students to introduce who they are just quickly, and so we know what capacity you're presenting. And then the students have prepared some visuals to show you guys. So yes, they're going to be using their slides. I will be, Sarah Besh, did you have a slideshow prepared? Or some slides to share? So I'm going to make you a co-host so you should be able to share that screen when we get to that. Okay, so let me move back to what I was saying. So when we're doing a debate tournament, students only register for one event, really. They can only do one debate topic. But at speech events, students can often do more than one. And this allows a student who likes both speech and debate to focus each weekend on the event they would like to do, instead of having these events be on top of each other. Here's an important thing, guys, I want to point out. Unless it is a limited prep speech, this year, all speeches can be recorded and submitted through Tabroom for this. So you will not have live speeches. We reached this decision so that we could really have equity. We have some students who live in areas, again, where the Wi-Fi is not stable. And wouldn't it be horrible if you got this wonderful climax of a speech you're getting to and your video freezes, or the judge's video freezes and they can't hear that delivery? That could cost you, right? So by having a video uploaded, that should prevent that from happening, is the goal. So we are aware that means that students might record these items more than once and pick their best recording. That's true. However, the students each tournament are uploading new videos, new versions of these videos, and they're expected to be practicing them all the time, because invitationals are not always doing recorded speeches. A lot of them are requiring live video. So it's kind of like right now, if I was working out a ton, or told you I was, and I was only doing from the waist up, sure, I'm going to look swollen like beefcake. But if I'm skipping leg day every day, when I walk out with my little toothpick legs, y'all are going to know the truth. So the same things with speech. They need to make sure that they're practicing, but you're going to see recorded speeches. The students are expected to join the room so that you know that they're there, but they are not going to speak. They're not going to play the video. And so that is one big difference, is that you're going to have videos for the limited prep speeches. That was also our only way of figuring out how to do duo interpretation, where there are two students speaking. Right now, with COVID restrictions, they can't be in the same room. So how do you have two duo students put their video together when they're not in the same room? So this is a huge change this year. You can see there's individual kind of explanations for these, but I thought it would be best if we had all of the interpretive events kind of talked about together. And for that, I'm going to pass off the mic to Sarah Besh. Sarah Besh, can you, I will stop screen sharing and then you should be able to screen share.
Yes. Just give me a second to get the presentation up.
Yep. By the way, let me compliment so many of these parents for having their video on, because as a teacher, I'm looking at gray boxes almost like 24/7. So it's nice to actually see like live humans. So I appreciate you. Hi, Raji. Those of you that did that. So you definitely appreciate it. Sarah, whenever you're ready, that's fine. And in speech events, you will often find more than one student in a room. There are generally going to be 6 students in your event. So I just want to point that out. Sarah Besh, go right ahead.
All right. So this is going to be like just generally about every speech and debate event. So we'll start off with speech events. So this is like the originals section. So originals has 4 subcategories. I have them all on the screen. So the most common one is called original oratory. It's going to be about a societal issue or a psychological phenomenon. A great example of this would be, I saw a speech about how we like misconceive anger. Like we tell people not to get angry all the time, but maybe our conceptions about displays of anger are wrong. Something like that would make a great original oratory. An original advocacy addresses a certain policy that needs to be passed. Like I know one of our students at Mira Loma did a speech about like asbestos laws and where asbestos should and shouldn't be present in like a whole variety of products. And he like drew up a policy solution and like laws for all of that. Then there's original prose and poetry, which is very complicated, but a gross oversimplification of it would be, it is more or less an interpretative event written by the student. When we get to the interp section, I'll explain what that means a little bit more. And then finally, there's expository/informative, which is meant to be like educative. It's like a school presentation where students can bring up props and like they'll have a poster board that they use to educate about any topic of their choice. So generally judging criteria for these, I have it at the bottom. The speech time is supposed to be like 8 to 10 minutes with a 30-second grace period. You should be judging primarily on content organization and structure, because these speeches will be written by the students. You do have the ability to judge how they organize their content. But if you disagree with something they say, try not to let your personal bias determine the ballot. Focus more on how clear they were in communicating their idea than anything else. And then you can look towards their writing style, their word choice, and then their overall style of delivery, how much emotion they had, all of those other stylistic elements. That's generally everything about originals. Next, there are limited preparation events, but since someone else is covering this, right? So should I just blip over it now? Okay.
Yeah, we're gonna let Mr. Corkery do that one.
Okay, sounds good. And then here are interpretation events. So there are 5 main subcategories here. You have dramatic interpretation, humorous, duo, program oral/thematic, and oratorical. So dramatic interpretation is meant to be like a published excerpt that is sad or serious in nature. This can be from like a book, a play, a TV show, a movie, as long as the excerpt is published somewhere and the student can prove that it has been published. It's fair game for interpretation. For dramatic, that excerpt should be sad or serious though. You should leave a dramatic interp room crying. Humorous interpretation is the exact opposite. It's supposed to be funny, with a special emphasis on like quick and distinct character transitions, which are called pops. You'll see them if you ever judge humorous interpretation. Students are very good about differentiating like a whole plethora of characters. Next, you have duo interpretation. This is a rare speech category in that you have 2 speakers talking at the same time. It is pretty much the same thing as dramatic or humorous. except with 2 speakers, and it has a couple extra caveats because of this. The speakers can't make direct eye contact with each other or make direct physical contact. So you as a judge should be on the lookout for all this. And then you have program oral interpretation / thematic, which is meant to be a collage of published excerpts surrounding one central theme. Like a speech I saw a lot my freshman year was this kid did the speech about jobs, and he picked like 6 or 7 different excerpts about like different jobs and talked about how they have like different psychological impacts on people. It was a really interesting piece. And then there's oratorical interpretation, which is where a student performs a previously performed speech. Like a very cookie cutter example would be I Have a Dream by Martin Luther King. A student could re-perform that. The way you should be judging this is very different from originals because the students are doing almost none of the writing here. So it's unfair to critique the speech itself and the words that they are saying, but you should be critiquing their style and their delivery for the most part, how much they communicate the emotion of the piece. So that's everything I have to say about speech.
Okay, so thank you, Sarah Besh. Now, a couple of things I want to bring up about just interps is that we'll notice that there are some slight changes in the individual events where Sarah Besh said HI, humorous interpretation, is supposed to be funny. And that is true. It is supposed to be more lighthearted. What we saw last year was a slight nuanced change, and Sarah Besh would probably agree with me on this. They weren't always as funny as they used to be. Like they say if you laugh, you burn 3 calories. And I thought, ooh, at nationals, I'm gonna get skinny because they're all so funny, right? But last year they were more serious. They had these really serious elements in it, and I think that was unique. DI also usually will follow the trends of what's going on in America's conscience. So we see a lot of Black Lives Matter discussions. We saw a lot of immigration pieces. So each one of these has its own flavor, and it's good to know when you're going into those events just a little bit of what to expect, but know that the event changes. It's organic. So you may see some slight changes each year. With Duo, if you're watching it live, while they are talking, they're together, they're not allowed to actually make eye contact or touch. So that will not be a problem in the video version for this year. And I had a question I'm about to type in right now that somebody said, well, what about timing? Well, Tab Room is actually going to have a built-in timing timer on it. So on your toolbar, on the right-hand side, there'll be a start and stop timer. There's also, even in debate, a prep timer. And that's going to help a lot of judges not feel that burden. But you are going to have to click on that to make sure that timing's going. The students are also very good about keeping track of time in debate rounds. So just kind of as a heads up, but Tab Room does have built-in timers, and that is helpful. Let's see here. Hugh, did you want to talk about the limited prep speech events?
Hi, everyone. I will share my screen if I'm able to do that. Let's see here.
You should. I did enable you as a co-host.
Okay. And I should have this open for you. If you can see, okay, that's Parley. So let me find our limited prep. Okay. Good. Okay, Josh, are you able to see that?
I am absolutely able to see that. You're good.
Okay. So thank you everyone for being here and volunteering to judge. I started judging about 3 years ago, and I've actually really enjoyed doing it to the point where I do it on my own time. A few weeks ago, I judged a middle school tournament, and then 2 weeks ago, I judged a Parley tournament, and it just is a really inspiring event when you watch these students and how articulate they are. So I want to tell you a little bit about the limited prep events for speech. These events are actually live. So these are events where students will come into your Zoom room and they will give a speech about a topic to where they've had limited prep. So the first limited prep event is called Impromptu. And this is a prep event where they get 2 minutes to prepare a 5-minute speech. And the topics can be very wide ranging about concrete and abstract nouns, about quotations, questions. And these are fun speeches to judge because the student's personality really comes out nicely here. So they would actually go into your Zoom room on an impromptu speech, and you would give them their choices for their topic. And then once they select a topic, you would time them for their 2 minutes. And then when that time's up, they will present their speech. Okay? And so these general guidelines that you see at the top of the screen are just straight from the judge's packet that was shared with you earlier. And so just to be clear, the contestants enter the room one at a time and draw a slip of paper from the judge. So you'll actually give them their selections through the Zoom chat. On the slip will be 3 topic choices. The contestants must choose one of 3. At the conclusion of the speech, the contestant may stay in the room and observe other speakers. But after drawing, the contestant has 2 minutes to think prior to speaking. The maximum time for the speech is 5 minutes. There is no minimum time. General guidelines. Let's compare the speakers to each other and give a rank of first, second, third, fourth, and so on. In general, coaches are expected to make sure contestants are following the rules of the event they entered. So evaluate the contestant's performance, but you don't have to police the event. The specific rules of each event are on the back of the ballot. So we have handouts for ballots in the past. If you have a question, report to the judges station and do not ask the students about the rules, but those are basically the rules right there. Okay, so that's the impromptu limited prep event. And now I want to tell you about extemporaneous speaking. Okay, we have, in short, the students are given 30 minutes to create a 7-minute speech. And so, judges, you are not giving the students their topic if you get assigned to extemp. You are going to be in your Zoom room waiting on the students to come in one at a time, because they're staggered in coming into the room, because I'll be in a room giving them their topics every 7 minutes. And so I'll be monitoring that they're taking 30 minutes to prepare their extemporaneous speech, and then I'll send them right to your Zoom room. And then 7 minutes later, I'll send someone else. 7 minutes later, someone else. So you can utilize the waiting room to have students wait before they come into your room, but try to get them moving pretty quickly, because we try to have that timing work out really well with the 30 minutes, and then they go right to their room and give their speech, so they don't have a ton of extra time. So I'll just read what says in the judges packet just to reinforce. Prior to coming to the rounds, contestants draw 3 topics, choose one, and are given 30 minutes to prepare an appropriate speech on a topic of significant contemporary interest discussed in major national news magazines during the weeks prior to the event. Contestants may have been permitted to use books, magazines, library aids, but not consult with other persons. They can use the internet this year. Contestants must speak in their assigned order as they arrive in the room. At the conclusion of the speech, the contestant may remain in the room to observe other speakers. Students speak on the topic they have drawn, and the maximum speaking time is 7 minutes, and you can just mark like how far they went over, like that 30-second grace period there. Okay, extemp is also a really fun event to judge. To think that our high school students are receiving difficult prompts like they are about national and world events, and are able to process that information and research and prepare a speech extemporaneously is amazing. And you will be amazed if you ever judge one of our varsity extemporaneous speaking events. In fact, one of our students from our league was top 5 in the entire nation this year. So yeah, you'll be impressed, and it'll be a fun event to judge. Okay. All right, I'll see you all when I talk about Parley.
Thank you so much, Hugh. So a couple of good questions in the chat that I want to highlight. If you're getting that message saying that you can't be found as a judge, your school should be able to take care of that when they first go do their judging assignments. You're in the pool now to be grabbed. They will grab you, and that should associate you with their school if you're a first-time judge. If this doesn't happen, trust me, your coaches will reach out to me and try to figure out what's going on with that. But for those of you that are brand new judges, so we've got that about 5 times, and that's okay. I expect that. Next thing with the couple of other questions that were going on is, will we be putting varsities or very veteran students in with very new students? And the answer is, generally speaking, no. Almost every category is going to have a novice or a varsity section. And your student, if they don't know that, should know that. Our league does let you distinguish between the two. This should also change your expectations. That means that if you know what you're getting a novice round, they might be getting still familiar with their speeches. You might see that there are some hiccups in their delivery. Whereas when you're judging a varsity, these are students who generally have either won their event before and then have advanced, or this isn't their first rodeo. They've done this enough times, they feel like they're now varsity. And so there is a difference in expectations in those. And your students can sign up with that. And that is a really good way to help them feel when they're new to an event that they're not just going to get obliterated by being in their same room as like the number 5 national ranking person, right? So if your student did not know that, please let them know. And then you should know that also as a judge. So I really appreciate that question, so that I can tell you that every event has a varsity and novice. Let's see here. Then inside of the prep events, Hugh brought up a very good point that we are not regulating the internet. However, could we, right? The only way to make sure that somebody like Gregory wasn't using the internet would be to have a computer with a camera facing Gregory's computer so we could see he wasn't opening up a new tab. And that just feels very 1984 and not something that we want to do. So right now we're just going to agree that we cannot regulate it. There is, again, best practice. Students should not be using the internet. They should be going off of what they came to the tournament with. And if they are using the internet, it's going to create a false dependency that will show up when they go to invitationals where maybe the internet's more regulated, or they require an adult in the room, or live tournaments when they eventually happen. But we don't want to be in that spot of having to turn you guys into reporters where you've got to feel like you're reporting the bad behavior of students. They generally come to do well. And nationally, there is some discussion that some of these events are moving away from regulating the internet anyway. So that was an important one. What is the time limit for oratorical interpretation? I'd have to look for that one, Sarah Besh. There are some time changes. There's been some small changes to events based about everything being online, and that PDF was shared with all the coaches so that students could get those. CHSSA, this chssa.org, has the state rules for time, and we follow those. So that would be a great resource. Let me go back to sharing my screen so I can keep us on track, guys. And I'm very happy to report we're on time. I was really worried because I'll never say in 20 words when I can say 50. So I'm actually pretty happy that we're where we're at right now. Anybody who's met me in real life knows that that is true. So that is, let's see here. What's left is our, I don't think I heard Sarah Besh talk about original prose and poetry. Sarah Besh, did you do prose and poetry?
I haven't done OPP, but I covered it just now.
Okay. Yeah. So OPP, here's the last thing about speech events that I want you guys to think about. And that is that students will pick these for different reasons. And it might be good to encourage your student to consider speech events if they haven't. Here's what I mean. In class at my school, we do a lot of seminar discussions where students are expected to respond to what each other are talking about in context with the text they're reading. And students who get very nervous about this don't seem to do as well. So students who then pick up things like impromptu speaking do so much better because they learn how to speak on the fly. And that's what we're looking at, right? People who can articulate what they mean right away. we have students who are extreme extroverts. And right now, with theater not happening at schools, they now have an audience to present pieces and ideas to make an audience react to the emotions that they're emoting. Advocacy is for students who maybe have felt activated by all these national social discussions, and that gives them a place to put this. And then original prose and poetry are really for our creative writers who are looking for someone to hear it. I find that students are often starved for someone to read what they have written outside of their parents. And this is a great place. So when you're thinking about speech events, you also want to think about how could this help a student grow and encourage them to pick events such as that. I'm often impressed when our debaters also go into impromptu, because that's going to help them in their PF rounds or LD rounds when they're having to respond to their competitors on the fly. So we'll see that there could be a lot of cross-pollination in these events. Now, in our agenda, we're going to cover now into debate topics. And for this, starting off, we're going to do a public forum. Again, like speech, debate has all of these different ways of arguing. And so the presenters for the different debate topics are going to try to tell you what their event is for, like what you should be looking for, and how does one figure out the winner. So on deck right now is Alex Sean. Alex, are you ready?
I am.
Okay, so as we're going to go into debate now, our tournament this weekend is a debate tournament. So this is like, if this was a meal, this is the main course. No pressure, Alex.
Yeah, all right. Okay, so hello everybody. My name's Alex. I'm a senior at Mariloma. I've done public forum for about 4 years now with Sarah Beige. We've been, all over the circuit, Tournament of Champions. Recently, we did quite well at Nationals. So this feedback will be pretty useful. I'm going to be going over what public forum is and then how you should be approaching the judging aspect. And before I get into it, I want to let everybody know that debaters understand that judging debate is very, very hard. And whatever decision that you make, you should be confident with it and stand by it. Sometimes debaters get a little frustrated after the rounds, but it's important that you know that you made the right decision at the end of the round. Getting into it, public forum is really interesting because the topics are always related to things that are pretty popular. So they're always foreign and domestic policy relating to some kind of country that everyone knows about. So for example, the debate topic, if you get chosen to judge public forum this next weekend, will be that the United States should enact the Medicare for All Act of 2019. Something to note about public forum is that it's a very evidence-based debate. You'll hear a lot of evidence being thrown out all across the board, but that does not mean that you should be declaring the winner based on, who spent more time Googling things, right? Logic and reasoning is extremely important for evidence-based debate, especially when we get conflicting evidence, right? Especially on this topic that you're going to be judging. Many debaters will have pieces of evidence that say opposite things. Someone might say that people are going to die, people are going to be saved. And that's when the logic and reasoning is really important to be evaluated. So how to vote in public forum. So first and foremost, you should be voting for the team that produces the clearer and more convincing argumentation, which is a pretty good way to evaluate any round. But if both sides have equally strong arguments in your mind, you should be voting for the team that is explaining best why the impact of their argument is greater than that of their opponents. So this is a little bit of a large statement, but to simplify it, if you believe that, say, both teams are telling you something that is true, the side that should win the round is the side that explains to you why the impact or the end result of their case is more important. So for an easy example, if someone says that they save 100,000 people every year, but the other team only saves 10,000 people, regardless of who is right, if you're both right, you should probably be voting for the side that saves more lives. That's a pretty intuitive way of judging debate, and it gets a little more complicated, but usually debaters will be doing a good job of helping you understand what they're talking about. And then the final note on this is to not bring in your own bias. I know for this topic, it's a very politicized topic, and you should know that debaters are going to be randomly chosen to debate on both sides. So, even if you don't personally agree with one of the sides in the debate, it's really important to only evaluate what is said inside of the round. This is something to keep in mind always when you're judging any kind of debate round. You can take a picture of this slide. You'll also get this when you are judging any PF round. This is just the amount of like speeches and what kind of times are in those speeches. I'll leave it up for a little bit if you do care about taking a picture. But again, if you do get chosen to judge public forum, they'll give you this little spreadsheet for you to follow along and know what speech is going on and how long it should be. And so one last note for public forum, it's just something that is in the rule book, but it kind of goes unnoticed a lot of the time, which is that no new evidence or arguments should be brought up in the last two speeches in the round. So the last two speeches of the round are called the final focuses. And this is basically to wrap up the debate and really just convince the judge and conclude every argument that's being made and go to the most important things in the round. One of the most important parts about this is that we don't want new arguments being brought up because these speeches are extremely short. They're about 2 minutes long, and it's very frustrating for some debaters when new arguments are being brought up when they really shouldn't be. So this is just something to keep in mind for public forum, which is that, again, no new evidence or arguments should be brought up in those 2-minute speeches at the end of the round. Does anyone have any questions regarding public forum? All right, great.
As a rebuttal that contains a new argument. Okay.
Yes, for rebuttal speeches, let's see if I can go back to that slide. The rebuttals actually happen relatively early into the round. You'll see it says second speaker from Team A and Team B. Those happen pretty early in the round. The only time when you can't introduce new arguments would be at the bottom where it says final focus. So any speech before that, new arguments can be made, new evidence can be presented. It's just for those last 2 minutes, you shouldn't be bringing anything new. It should be a recap of what's happened.
Now, an important thing to think about with public forum is the students are often going to say something like, I believe pineapple does not belong on pizza for these 3 reasons. And there are two students on each team, and they will alternate in who presents. So the first speaker may say, pineapple does not belong on pizza for these reasons. And they'll line up 3 reasons. The other team will then say pineapple should be on pizza. Here's our 3 reasons. And by the way, here's why the 2 of the arguments the other team presented are stupid. And I'm bringing this down to like basic elementary level. That means one of the issues that the anti-pineapple team brought up was the other team didn't want to argue. So you might see that additional things are brought up later because they let one of those arguments fly. So you're usually trying to figure out what has actually been argued. Right before we were doing this meeting this morning, I was watching the president's health report come out at Walter Reed Hospital. And if you guys watched that, you would notice that when the physician said the president is not on oxygen, the reporter asked, has the president ever been on oxygen? The doctor says back, the president is not on oxygen right now. The reporters picked up right away. You keep saying now, has he ever been? Not while he's been at the hospital. He's not been on oxygen. And the reporters go, to your knowledge, has he ever been on oxygen in the last 72 hours? Like you can hear when there's holes in arguments. When you're listening to debate, you're trying to listen to that too. Now, a good opponent will sense these weaknesses in a case, and they'll call that out to you by arguing. But if a team drops an argument, that means usually you're conceding that's a good point. So what happens, it gets a little confusing. So let me go into a document just to share a little bit. This is an example. This is a little confusing if you've never done this before. But what I and other people will do is if you have a team that's called the affirmative, that means they believe in the measure. They affirm it. They think it should happen. They're going to bring up some points, right? Like, hey, I think that should happen for like reasons 1, 2, and 3. You're looking to see, does the other team like listen and follow that? Are there gaps where things are not brought up at all? And so that might help you keep track of what these teams are even saying. I will write down sources and numbers and look in the end, like what was actually dropped. What did they not pick up? What did other groups leave with? And that's why, to Alex's point, no new information can be brought up in the end, because it doesn't give the other team a chance to vet, validate, or argue that new information. So that's why it's important. And we call this flowing. Are you flowing the case? Like where you literally take out a piece of paper and write down their arguments. If you're new, take a line down the middle piece of a paper, F and egg, and then just start writing down what they're arguing. And just I draw lines sometimes just to connect the arguments to see, did the other team talk? Are they even talking about the same thing? Because sometimes they're not. Sometimes you have a team that was not prepared for what one case is there. So if we're talking about healthcare, and Alex's big argument is its effect on just like U.S. life expectancy, and how that's not equal because hospitals are not built in equal places. And the other team had no plan to talk about that. They're going to bring up entirely different arguments. So it's good to take out a piece of paper and have notes for a PF. Now we're going to talk about Lincoln Douglas. Lincoln Douglas is probably like the oldest type of debate that's out there. And while public forum usually will talk about the effects of implementing this policy, so they want to show you why you should or shouldn't believe in it. We see this a lot in presidential debates when presidents talk about taxes. But Lincoln Douglas is more about the moral persuasion. This should happen. This must happen. This should never happen. So they're still going to use evidence, but their job is to create a moral appeal to you, not a factual appeal. And so students will be much more persuasive in this. The Lincoln Douglas, known as LD, is one-on-one debate. And they have a similar time chart that you will see given to you in the tab room. I don't want to focus on the timing today, but it will be in the tab room document so you can keep track of the time. And the students keep track of time too. So that's a wonderful thing about both LD and PF, is that the contestants are going to keep track of exactly how much prep time the other team uses. And what prep time is once the round has started, each team is given, let's say, 4 minutes of prep. That means that after you start your presentation, like if you're the competitor, I'm going to take maybe a minute of prep to prepare my speech to talk about what you talked about. I have 3 more minutes before the event is done that I can use prep time. And so students will help keep track of that. You as a judge keep track of that. And it looks like there's a good thing going on in the chat right now from Steven that Alex was definitely agreeing with. So Steven says, unlikely you will hear any theory, argument, and league round, but if you do, listen to the arguments and evaluate like anything else in the debate based on what the debaters argue. If the debater does not explain it well enough for you to understand what it is, then how can you evaluate it? So that is important. You know, that goes back to our thoughts, Stephen. Thank you for contributing. That students, you're supposed to judge on what the students present. If you know there's a bigger reason why something should or shouldn't happen and the student doesn't say it, you can't use it. Prep time is generally like it's posted, I think it's like 4 minutes. And students will declare in a round that they're going to use some of their prep time. They don't just use it. So they'll say, okay, I'm going to be beginning prep. And you'll be like, okay, start. And there's a little button on tab room you'll click on that'll start their prep timer to keep track of how much prep time they have. Again, I'm telling you, the other team will also help keep track of that. So when we do our debate tournament this coming Saturday in the judges' room, I will show you what that looks like to make sure everyone's ready. And because we're online, every instruction should be declared, every comment should be declared, and you should wait. So for example, if I said, are all contestants ready to begin? I need to wait for them all to say yes. And then I'll say, okay, you can start your timers. Whatever team's going first, go. Like that kind of, so you want to make sure everyone's got a chance to comment, okay? So Lincoln Douglas is very similar to PF. Again, it's moral and it's single. And then on our agenda, I'm trying to make sure I go in the right order. Just a moment here. Stephen, is it you that are next? Where did my agenda go?
Yes, I think.
Awesome. Okay, so we're gonna do policy, and Stephen Goldberg
Okay,
is,
that'll work.
and then give me just a moment here. Stephen, are you gonna talk, or are you gonna give a presentation?
I've got a couple slides, or I can use the one that you just had up. Either way.
Okay, if you got a couple slides and you feel comfortable sharing, you can take over screen share.
Yeah, I do. I've got them on my screen now. If you can.
Yep. I didn't make you a co-host, I don't think. Hold on. I may have forgotten to do that for you. That was not a slight against you. You're just Stephen, I think, in the chat.
Yes.
Okay. That's why I was looking for Goldberg. Sorry, a second. There you go, Stephen.
Okay. Can we see that now?
Not yet.
Do I need to do something? There we go. Hold on. That may help.
Okay.
Hold on a second.
There we go, Stephen.
There we go.
It's happening. It's happening.
So I'm going to take a few minutes to talk about policy debate. This is a 2-on-2 debate event that focuses on a policy proposal about the resolution. And it's the same resolution for the entire year. So it's a real opportunity for the debaters to dig into a particular topic area for the year. And this year's resolution is resolved the United States federal government should enact substantial criminal justice reform in one or more of the following: policing, sentencing, and forensic science. And a policy debate is a longer debate round. The debates we've talked about so far will have, in any time block, there'll be 2 of them. This particular debate is a longer debate that there's only going to be 1 in a particular time block. And there are 8 speeches in a debate round. The first 4 speeches are 8 minutes long, followed by a 3-minute cross-examination by the other team after each speech. And then the last 4 speeches, which we call the first 4 speeches the constructive speeches, and we call the last 4 speeches the rebuttal speeches, and those rebuttal speeches are 5 minutes long each. And one sort of hallmark of a policy debate round is you'll notice the negative has 2 speeches in a row. We call that the negative block. And then the first affirmative rebuttal has 5 minutes to answer 13 minutes of negative arguments. And so that's a place that's a little different than some of the other debates that we've talked about so far. I saw in the chat some questions about prep time, and in many ways that's the most important in policy debate. It's also very important in Lincoln Douglas. There is a set amount of prep time for each team for the debate. For policy debate, it is 8 minutes per team, and the debaters decide amongst themselves how they're going to split that before each speech. The judges don't decide that. The only thing the judge has to do is time after each speech, how long prep time is taking, to make sure that the team does not take more than 8 minutes for the entire debate round. A couple of I want to echo what has been said so far, I think, very well. And it's equally important in policy debate that it's important to keep your personal views outside the room and to judge based upon what is said in the debate round. The debaters have no idea who you are. And so really just as a matter of fairness, if nothing else, the debaters have their arguments, and, they may or may not know that you have a, personal view about whatever those arguments are. And so in order to avoid, anything like that, we just do our best to decide the debate based on what is said in the debate round and based upon the arguments that are made. A couple of other concepts I want to mention in policy debate. There's a concept called topicality, which is the idea that is, and actually, let me go back for a second. The first affirmative speech will present a plan as to why the resolution is true. And the focus of the debate is on whether that plan is a good idea or not. And so the negative, one thing that the negative can argue is that the plan really isn't substantial criminal justice reform in one of the areas. And we call that argument topicality. And you might very well hear that argument in a policy debate round. Another thing the negative might do is called a disadvantage. This is a reason why the plan is a bad idea, why the plan causes bad things. And a lot of policy debates, at the end of the debate, the argument will be comparing the good things that the affirmative wins the plan will cause versus the bad things that the negative will say that the plan causes. And it's up to the judge to evaluate those arguments based on which is bigger and how much of a risk of those things the various teams win, and then decide who wins the debate based on that. Let me say two other things real quick. It's up to the debaters to adapt to you. And so you'll sometimes, hear debaters say, oh, those parent judges, they don't know what they're talking about. Do not worry about that. It is up to the debaters to adapt to you. If you have not been judging for very long, even if you have been, but never debated yourself, it is up to the debaters to explain the debate to you and to explain the debate in a way that you understand. And if you don't understand the arguments that a team is making, that is on them, not on you. And if the basis for your decision is, I'm sorry, I didn't understand your arguments, so I couldn't evaluate them, that's perfectly reasonable if that's the situation. And you should never feel bad about that. It is up to the debaters to explain what's going on and to make their arguments. And if they don't do that, that's on them, and you should in no way feel bad about that. So that's a super, super quick overview. I'm going to put in the chat two things that you might want to look at if you really want to go a lot further in depth. On the Sacramento Urban Debate League YouTube channel, there is a sample debate from a couple of years ago on the immigration reform topic. That is just a debate to watch that's kind of annotated that will show you what goes on in a policy debate round. There's also a much longer hour plus judging presentation about debate in general. It focuses on policy debate. And that is also from a prior topic, but other than what the topic is, the information is good. So I will put those two links in the chat for you if you are interested in those. And I can stick around for any questions in the chat if we're going to stick around afterwards. But yeah.
Steven, if you could unshare your screen then?
That's
Thank
what
you
I'm
so much.
trying to figure out how to do.
No problem.
I got it.
And what I wanted to do was I also had a student. Policy is one of those that I was not myself very experienced with until about 2 years ago. So some of these events you might get more often. So you're like, oh, I'm good with public forum. I've done it all the time. And you keep judging because you know it. And you get a really good instinct. And then you get slotted to an event you never done. And I happened to meet with nationals, and that was a learning curve, guys. So even if you judge other events, every event is different. And so I thank you, Stephen, for putting in the resources in the chat when you do the YouTube link. That'll be great. So I wanted to bring in a student to talk about this also. So from the judge's perspective, from a student perspective, what are they looking for from judges, and what judges can do to help make sure the students are getting good feedback? So I'm gonna have Derek take over. Derek, I think I already made you a co-host. I don't know if I did this. Let me just look really quick. Well, right now. So I don't know if you need to, but if you've got anything you want to present, you can now take over the screen.
Yeah, for sure.
And then there's a parent question maybe we can answer here in just a second. So Derek, go ahead and go first.
I just need to find the one really quickly and then share that. But yeah, so basically, guys, before we get started, just a little bit about myself. I'm the captain of policy at the Mira Loma speech and debate team. So I've been doing policy for a couple years now, and I think it's just important also for you guys to kind of get a feel for like what the debaters themselves are thinking, what we're thinking when we're asking you guys to evaluate the round. So yeah, so I'm just going to talk a little bit about that now. All right. So let's see. Application. Okay, so can everybody see Mr. Simpson, can you see the share screen? Awesome. Okay, so yeah, so I'll get started on just talking a little bit about policy debate. So I want to start off by just seconding and agreeing with everything that Mr. Goldberg had said so far. So everything that he said is like absolutely correct about policy, absolutely true, right? And policy debate, it's like he said, it's centered around a plan, right? It's centered around a policy proposal. And again, it's two-person teams, right? There's two sides. There's the affirmative side, and then there's the negative side. And we call them the AF and the neg. And what the affirmative team has to do is they have to affirm the resolution, right? They have to say the resolution is true, the resolution is good, and they do this by presenting a plan, a policy proposal. And this plan has to do something good in the world, right? And that's how you evaluate whether or not the affirmative team wins. So for example, this year, our resolution, as Mr. Goldberg already talked about, the resolution is the U.S. federal government should enact substantial criminal justice reform in forensic sciences, policing, or sentencing. Now, I just gave you like the shortened version here, but basically you have this resolution, and then the affirmative team has to affirm the resolution by presenting a plan. Now, the plan could look something like this, right? What I have here, and it says the U.S. should enact criminal justice reform by mandating police body cams, right? And that could be one example of what a plan could look like if they said we should have police body cameras. But again, you guys kind of see how this is like just a specific version of the resolution. It's a policy proposal that the affirmative team advocates for. But again, it's just one of like millions of different options of plans that potentially the affirmative team could choose from. So that's what we have so far, right? We got the affirmative team, they are presenting a policy proposal. And then next, the negative team has to negate the affirmative, right? So there's a couple ways that the negative team can do that. They can say the plan is bad, the plan is unnecessary, it's ineffective, or it's not topical under the resolution. So let's start off with a little bit about just the structure really quickly of policy debate. So the way policy debate works, right, is we have each person, there's two people on each team, gives two speeches. They give a constructive speech and a rebuttal speech. And all of the constructive speeches are 8 minutes long, and then all the rebuttal speeches are 5 minutes long. And after each constructive, there's 3 minutes for cross-examination. And what cross-examination is, it's when one team can ask the other team questions. So after the affirmative gives their speech, the negative will go up and cross-examine them. They'll be like, hey, could you clarify this part about the plan? Hey, did you realize this contradiction in your plan? And what about this? Did you notice this? So they'll ask some questions, and then they can put the affirmative or the other team in some tough positions, or they can get some concessions out of the other team. So that's what cross-examination is for, and that's just kind of how the structure looks like. And again, as Mr. Goldberg already mentioned, policy debate is a bit longer than the other debate forms, right? In I think public forum, they have 4-minute speeches and 2-minute speeches. Here we have 8-minute speeches and 5-minute speeches. So it's really a better opportunity, like, to really dig in and go in depth on whatever topic or resolution it is. And again, I just want to, like with most other debate forums, right? We don't want to see like new evidence or new arguments in the rebuttal speeches, right? Because for these last couple of speeches, right, there's only like, if for example, if they bring up new evidence or new arguments in the 2AR, which is the second affirmative rebuttal, that's the last speech of the round. So if they do that, there's no way for the other team to respond to what they're saying. So generally speaking, we don't want to see new arguments, in the rebuttal speeches. However, maybe the first negative rebuttal is okay, because here's the thing, guys. Just to like really go through the structure really quickly, you guys kind of see how we start off with the affirmative, we go negative, we go affirmative, we go negative. So it like flip-flops affirmative and negative. But then when we get down here, there's 2 negative speeches in a row. There's a negative constructive and the negative rebuttal. Now we call this the negative block, the neg block. And it's this huge chunk of time that they get to refute everything the affirmative has said so far. So in this block, if they have new evidence, new arguments, generally that's okay, even if it's in a rebuttal speech. But then once we get down here, right, once we get to like the second negative rebuttal, the 2NR, the 2ARs, we don't want to see new evidence, new arguments, because there's just no way to respond to those arguments, and it would be unfair for the judge to try and consider them. All right. So I'm going to talk really quickly about the affirmative in policy and how it sort of works, right? So the AF team, like I mentioned earlier, has to present a plan. And there's 4 considerations that you kind of have to look towards to see if their plan is sound, to see if their plan is legitimate. And these 4 concerns, we call them the 4 stock issues, right? And the first stock issue is topicality. And this kind of deals with the question of, is the plan topical under this year's resolution? So, for example, right, the resolution that I talked about earlier is the United States federal government should enact substantial criminal justice reform in one of the following 3 sectors. Now, if I came up and my plan was the U.S. federal government should give Derek ice cream, you guys kind of see how that's not topical. That would not fall under the resolution because 1, it's not criminal justice reform. 2, it's not substantial, and 3, it doesn't fall into one of those categories. So topicality deals with the question of whether or not the affirmatives team does fall under the resolution. Now, the next consideration is the advantages and harms. And this kind of deals with what is the problem that needs to be addressed? What are the harms that are going to happen right now if we don't pass the plan? Or you can think of it as what are the advantages, the good things that are going to happen if we do pass the plan? So either way, right, the plan has to bring some sort of benefit or it has to prevent some sort of harm in this world in order for it to be a sound, legitimate policy. Now, the next consideration that you kind of have to think about is something called inherency. And this is a question of whether or not something is already being done in the status quo right now to solve this problem. For example, if you look towards the last example that I gave about body cameras, about how the U.S. federal government should mandate body cameras, if the other team comes up and says, well, the U.S. federal government already does enact body cameras, then if you can see that like something is already being done to fix the problem that this team is trying to do, then there's no reason for us to affirm the plan. There's no reason for the plan if the problem that it is trying to solve is already being solved right now in the status quo. So if that's the case, then the plan isn't inherent. It has no inherency. And that's another consideration that the negative team has to think about when dealing with the affirmative plan. And then the final kind of consideration that we need to look towards is solvency. And this is really easy, right? It's just, does the plan solve? So for example, if I'm talking about police body cameras, again, and I say that police body cameras will lead to a decrease in use of force complaints and just police brutality in general, that can be questioned, right? Because then the other team can come up and say, well, do body cameras really do solve this problem? And then if they can prove that body cameras don't solve this problem, then my plan is worthless. The affirmative team's plan is useless if it doesn't actually solve the problem that it pretends like it's addressing. So we do need solvency, and that's the last kind of consideration that we can look towards for the affirmative plan. All right, that was long, and I'm going to try to go a little faster, but now I'm going to talk about the negative side in policy. And again, if we remember back to when I was talking earlier, the negative team has to negate the resolution, or they negate the affirmative's plan. So they say the affirmative's plan, it's bad, it's unnecessary, it's useless, it's ineffective. And what are some possible negative arguments? Well, these are probably going to be the most 2 common negative arguments in policy debate. There's some more that I'm not going to get into because they're kind of confusing, and really, and generally speaking, like realistically, you won't see them at league tournaments or whatever. So we'll just focus on these 2, which are the most common. And the first one is a disadvantage. And what is a disadvantage? Well, the disadvantage is the negative team is going to come up and say something bad happens if the AF plan is passed. So, for example, if we're talking about the body camera topic again, if I say like the U.S. federal government should mandate body cameras, and then the negative is going to come up and say, well, if we mandate body cameras, this is going to take away a lot of money. It's going to cost a lot of money, and it's going to send the economy into a recession. Something like that, right? Maybe that doesn't make sense. All right, there's probably better examples, but something like that, right? And it'll be like, if we do this, if we do the AF plan, a massive bad disadvantage is going to happen. And we call those DAs, we call them disads, and that's an argument that the negative can make about the plan, about the affirmative's policy. Now, another argument that we can make is counterplans. And a counterplan is basically, what is the potential solution to the problem that is not the plan and is better than the plan in some sort of way? So, for example, instead of saying that we should mandate body cameras, they could say, like, we should just straight up fire every single police officer that uses excessive force, something like that. And then they could say, this is the counter plan, and this is better than the plan because it'll send like a deterrent. It'll send like this message to police officers that they can't do this kind of stuff or whatever, right? And obviously these kind of arguments, right, they can exist on all sides of the political spectrum. So really you want to evaluate them by the merit of their argument and not necessarily by your own like political convictions, which is something that I want to echo that everybody, all the other debate forums have said so far. But basically, right, if the counterplan can prove that there's another better option than the plan, and somehow, right, if you do the plan, then the counterplan can't happen, then the negative team should win because they prove that the affirmative team and the plan that they've presented is a bad thing. Now, I'll give you an example of how counterplans sort of work, right? So if my plan is the US federal government should give Derek ice cream, okay? And that might be my plan. And then my counterplan is the US federal government should instead give Derek cookies. Now, the US federal government can't do both because let's say that they don't have enough money to do both. Well, in that case, if the US government gives me ice cream, then they can't give me cookies. So if you can prove that giving me cookies is better than giving me ice cream, then the counterplan is better than the plan. So that might be a long-winded explanation that might not make any sense. So if you have any questions, please let me know. But other than that, so those are like the different arguments that the negative can make in policy. And then, of course, the last kind of argument that the negative can make is to attack the plan's stock issues. So we go back to this slide. If you guys remember these 4 stock issues, the negative can attack these as well. And we call those case arguments. So this is a really big idea. And it's basically, if the affirmative team wants to win the debate, they have to win on all 4 of those previous stock issues. And if the negative team wins even one of them, then they win the entire debate. And I know what you guys are thinking, like, why is that? Like, that doesn't seem fair. That doesn't seem right. Well, if we go back to the stock issues, right, let's start off with topicality. If the neg can prove that the affirmative team plan doesn't fall under the resolution, then there's no reason to debate it in the first place. Then it's just a really bad plan, right? It doesn't even fall under the resolution. We have a resolution for a reason, right? The affirmative team has to affirm the resolution. And if their plan doesn't fall under the scope of our resolution for this year, then there's no reason for them to win the debate because it's just an irrelevant policy. And let's talk about the advantages and harms. So if the negative team can prove that there's no advantage to the AF plan, or that the AF plan doesn't prevent any harms from happening, then again, there's no reason that we need the plan if it doesn't do anything, if there's no good thing that happened, if there's no bad things that happen if we don't do the plan, there's no reason that we need the plan. And then inherency, of course, again, if the negative team can prove that the AF plan is not inherent, meaning there's already stuff that's being done to solve the problem, then we don't need the AF plan. We don't need the affirmative plan if stuff is already being done to solve the problem. And then finally, we move on to solvency. And this one is pretty easy to understand, I think, right? If you can prove that the plan, the affirmative's policy, doesn't actually solve its problem, doesn't actually solve the issue that it purports to solve, then again, we don't need it at all because it doesn't solve the problem. So all these kind of things, right? Hopefully that kind of helps you to understand like just the theory of policy debate and how like arguments can work and our arguments like interlock and stuff. So that's kind of how that works, right? And just to end off with some general stuff, right? I want to just emphasize again, I think a lot of other debate forums already talked about this, but a dropped argument is a conceded argument, meaning if a team fails to respond to an argument. So if I read 3 different arguments and the other team only responds to the first 2, then the last third one that they didn't respond to, it's a conceded argument, right? They concede that basically it's true, right? Because they didn't drop any responses on it. They didn't say anything to prove that it wasn't true. So they concede that it's true. And then finally, I want to touch a little bit about this idea of fiat. And what fiat is this idea that the affirmative team doesn't have to prove that their plan is feasible. So if my plan is like the US federal government should mandate body cameras, and then the other team comes up and says, well, Congress is deadlocked, this will never pass, right? there's a Democratic majority led House and a Republican majority Senate, they're never going to let this pass. So they're going to say, like, your plan isn't feasible. Well, luckily, the affirmative team doesn't have to defend the feasibility of their plan, right? Because if we look towards the resolution, it says the U.S. federal government should enact criminal justice reform, not whether or not the U.S. government can enact federal or criminal justice reform. So those kind of things, right? That's the idea of fiat. So those are like just two kind of the last things I wanted to touch about. But again, I know policy debate can be kind of confusing at times. It's really in depth and it can get really technical. So again, it's the job of the debaters to make it as clear as possible, to make it as easy for the judges to understand. And of course, if anybody has any questions, y'all can of course like drop them in the chat and just ask me, and I'll be more than happy to answer them. Okay, so yeah, that's all I have for my spiel about policy.
Okay, now we have two more events that I'd like to cover quickly because I know we're going over time just a little bit. We want to cover Congress. Congress has a different timing than the rest of the events, but and then we have parliamentary debate, and then I want to open it up to some last minute judge considerations. So pardon me if I'm getting into your lunchtime a little bit, but I do want to wrap these up so that when we talk about it again next week, you're not hearing some of this for the first time. So we have Shanice, who is going to talk to us about Congress.
Hi, everybody. I'm going to quickly share my screen. All right. Can everyone see and hear me fine?
We can, yeah, we can see your screen. You're good.
Okay.
And Shanice, just as a guidance, we do want to try to be concise while not missing anything important, okay? Just because of the timing.
Okay. All right.
Thank you so much.
So I'm Shanice Cole-Henry. I am the Congress captain at Mara Loma. I've been competing in Congress for 4 years, and I'm going to give you a quick overview of what it is and how it works. So first, the main thing I want everyone to understand is that Congress is kind of like role-playing. It's a debate form, but when you're a Congress debater, you're modeling actual congressional debaters. So there's a lot of lingo and different actions we take just to model not only a debate, but also that specific type of debate form. When you go into a round, it may be a little overwhelming or confusing because we're saying all these random words and there's a person banging a hammer on the table. But I just want to tell you that I'm going to be explaining some of the lingo in a few minutes, but just to remember that it is role playing and we kind of just do, it's kind of just part of the debate form. So what Congress debaters do is we debate possible laws and bills similar to policy, but not exactly. And we're basically just going to talk about if the law should be put into place. And then there will be one person who is going to run the legislative session, and that's called the PO. The actual amount of debaters will be about 18 people, and each person will have 3 minutes to speak, and then 1 minute questioning period where anyone from the room can ask them questions about their speech, and the PO is in charge of choosing who asks the questions. A debater can give more than one speech, but it's not required. And then with league tournaments, Congress debates are an hour and a half, and with invitationals, they can be up to 3 hours. The reason it's a little bit longer than other debate forms is just because the amount of people, rather than having a 2-on-2 or a 1-on-1, we're having 18 different people give their perspective on the issue. Okay, so this is just a bracket to explain the different things. First, let's talk about motions, or just the little lingo we use. Oftentimes, anytime a debater wants to do anything, they have to be addressed by the PO and then have the ability to stand. But I'm not going to explain all the different terms to you, just some of the important ones. In the beginning of the round, everyone's going to be seated, and you're also going to have your own seating chart. From there, someone in the room, one of the debaters, will ask to open the debate, which means to start, and then we'll read the topic out loud, or the PO will read it so you know what the topic is. And previous question is just when we end the debate. If a debater ever asks for a personal privilege, that just means they need to use the bathroom or step out the room. And if a debater ever says point of order, they're basically saying that someone's cheating or the PO who runs around messed up. Looking at speeches specifically. So, because we are modeling Congress debaters, our focus of the speech is basically how will this bill or this topic affect the American people? This, of course, similar to the other debates, but it's really specific in our focus of whatever we do, we want to make sure that the constituents benefit economically, and that the U.S. economy will be okay, and that it's equitable, and things like that. So things to look for that will show you if a speech is better or worse. Because in Congress, because there's so many people speaking, you want to focus on less who won the argument. The reason why is because everyone chooses if they're on the affirmation side or the negation side. And no matter who, if the affirmation or negation wins the actual round, each person has their own individual speech and their own individual presentation. And when you're judging, you want to pick up to 8 or like around 8 people who are the best debaters in the room, and then everyone else. Therefore, you want to less look at if their side won the round, but did they convey their points well? And then right here, some main things to focus on was, for one, was their topic unique? Sometimes in Congress, it's hard to come up with a unique argument if the argument is one-sided. So a trait of a good Congress debater is when they give a speech that stands out from the rest. Also, sources and reasoning. If someone has either more legitimate sources or they just bring up more sources to explain their point, then that's another way of seeing that they know what they're talking about. But sometimes they may just use reasoning and logic. And if you can follow along with that and it seems like it's something that makes sense and they present it well, then that's another thing of a good Congress debater. And then the last was high contribution. So basically, sometimes someone will give a speech and not talk for the rest of the round. And that's not a good Congress debater, not because their speech wasn't good, but because the main thing in Congress is that you add to the debate, that you continue to ask questions and possibly even give a second speech. So that's some of the things you want to look for. Some of the nice things about Congress is that it's a form of debate that models an actual thing that happens in the real world. And then it's audience-based, you gain leadership skills, and it's heavily based off extemporaneous speaking. But I want to highlight real quick, it's not on the slides, the differences between the other debates just so you can get it in your head. For one, there is no prep time. The debaters come into the room and the round runs straight through, oftentimes, unless you're at invitationals, without any breaks. If a student wants to write a speech, that's completely their right, but the round doesn't stop. They just write it during the round. Another thing is decorum, or just a presentation. Of course, all debaters or speech students should have a level of professionalism, but because we're role playing in Congress, it's more important that you if you raise your voice, you're not attacking a person, but you're speaking passionately. Or if you're not happy with what someone said, you don't get all okay. You're allowed to get very passionate, but at the same time, you still have to keep the persona of a congressional debater. So that's something very specific to Congress. The other thing is, of course, there's a lot of people that you're presenting to and that you're debating with instead of just 2 or 1 people. The topics change every tournament. So every tournament, there are 4 new topics, if not more. And so every time you judge a round at Congress, if you're judging Congress at a debate tournament, every time you step into a room, there will be a new topic, but that topic will be presented to you. And as you listen to the debate, it'll be further explained. And then there's no novice. So that's a question that was brought up earlier, like, is there novice? And Congress is one of the few where you are legitimately thrown in, but that's a plus and a negative because it makes it harder, but it also enhances the amount of growth you have because you have to learn how to debate with a nationally ranked student and to still do well. So if there's any questions, please put them in the chat, but that is congressional debate.
Jeez, that was awesome. I really appreciate the visuals just because I think with vocabulary for us to associate, what some of these vocabulary words really mean helps. We have one more topic to go over, and that's going to be Parley. Hugh, did you want to take back control over that?
Yes, I will be as brief as possible. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen and pull up Okay, so parley debate. Earlier in the chat, someone asked what an online ballot might look like, and that's what it'll look like from your perspective. Once you hit start round, then you'll have a place to actually type in your comments as students are debating. So you'll probably have two tabs open. One will be the Zoom, the other one will be this. I actually use a laptop for one and a laptop for the other. And so that's what the debate judging instructions look like in that long Google document that you have. I'll break it down a little bit for you. Parley debate is parliamentary debate. It's a 2-on-2 debate. Teams get 20 minutes at the tournament to prepare a response to a resolution that they get, again, at the tournament. So I'll be the one to give them a resolution. They get 20 minutes to prepare, whether it's an AF or a neg, and then they go to your room and they debate it out. So we will have a different resolution each round. So you'll hear a different topic, and those topics will be policy, like our policy coach and our policy student so aptly explained. A lot of those things transfer over. But since it's a parley debate, the preparation is only 20 minutes. So you're not going to be getting the kind of evidence that you'll get in a policy debate. In fact, evidence will be very little, which I'll talk about in a minute. Another one could be like a values debate, and that just kind of puts values against each other. So it's LD-like in that way. And then another one could be a factual debate, which is just one strong statement saying that something is true. For example, social media is the largest contributor of political polarization. And so parley debate's fun to judge because you're judging different topics and you're getting a good perspective from lots of different students. When I judged a couple weeks ago, I heard the topic of out-of-state telehealth. And one student from Berkeley just made the most compelling argument for why, yes, anyone in any state should be able to access telehealth benefits from any other state. And it was so enjoyable to watch. So you're going to have fun judging parley. Also, we have a novice and a varsity division. So the novices in parley are truly going to be novices. And so the debate could get a little messy as they learn to create their arguments in just 20 minutes. So just keep that in mind. The intent of parliamentary debate is to encourage extemporaneous argumentation. Debaters should primarily rely on logic and general knowledge. Reference to published sources is allowed, but should be limited. And so parley really captures that extemporaneous debate and really showcases a student's general knowledge and ability to create arguments and to create reasons for those arguments, and then the explaining and the elaboration. And so, yes, they can use sources, they can use the internet, but you won't see as much evidence as you would in public forum or policy or Lincoln Douglas or Congress. And so, yeah, that's parley debate. The students are allowed to use published sources. And the rule is they need to transcribe that full quotation by hand on a piece of paper during their prep time, and they must show that piece of paper on request. And so I haven't had that happen in the tournament that I judge, but yeah, if they're using it and they're called upon it, they need to show a piece of paper with the full citation and the full quote. And so the other team might make a request for that in what we call point of information, which I'll explain in a second. So some jargon for parley. Point of information. First off, we will have no prep time in parley. Okay, so the debate will run straight through. And there will also be no like cross-examination sections. The debate will run straight through. But students are allowed to stand up or raise their hand, and they can ask a question of the opposing team. The time does not stop during that time. So you keep the clock rolling, and I'll give you the speech times in a second. But yeah, and then the person who's giving the speech has the opportunity to answer the question or say, no, thank you. And then the question doesn't get asked. The question can also be a statement, and it's 15 seconds long, okay? A POO, we heard a reference to this just a few minutes ago, is a point of order, and that's just calling out a broken rule. That happens at the very end of the debate on those students' last speeches, okay? We also have an opposition block, and that's a 12-minute block of time where the negative side speaks twice in a row, okay? The government in Parley is the affirmation. The opposition is the negation. It's totally okay to use the terms af and neg. That's what students are used to, and students may probably use those terms as well. And then USFG is United States federal government, okay? During the debate, we'll have an af speaker for 7 minutes, a neg speaker for 8 minutes, af speaker for 8 minutes, neg speaker for 8 minutes, negative speaker, again, there's that negative block for 4 minutes, and affirmative speaker for 5 minutes, okay? And just like our student presenters told you, in those last 2 speeches, no new arguments are allowed. And that's where if someone's giving a new argument in that last speech, another student might say point of order. And that means they're calling it out to the judge that, hey, a new argument is being made. You will stop the clock if someone says point of order. Point of orders are not allowed in any speeches except for those last 2. So remember that. And I got a little slide about that too. Okay. So there's your POI. Remember, I told you a couple minutes ago that a student can stand up and ask the speaker a question. You keep the clock rolling. And a point of information is a single short question or statement addressed by a member of the opposing team to the debater who has the floor. The debater can accept or decline the POI. And follow-up POIs are only allowed as separately recognized for the debater who has the floor. So it's a back and forth. You may see on Zoom, someone will raise their hand, say POI, and then the speaker will say no thank you, or I'll take your point. And then you'll see the kind of back and forth, but it should only be 15 seconds, and then maybe follow up. But yeah, just keep the clock rolling, and that's up to the speaker to control that time. So number 3, POIs do come out of the speech time of the debater who has the floor, so time should not be stopped for a POI, and each POI should not exceed 15 seconds. Okay, so remember, a POI can be a question or it can be a short statement. Here's that POO I was telling you about. And so same thing, a POO is where it happens in those last 2 speeches. If the debater raises his hand and says POO, it can only be used for if the debater is pointing out that the speaker is making a brand new argument, okay? So a debater may raise a point of order if they believe the opposing team bringing up a new argument. Points of order are not allowed during those 4 constructive speeches, but are allowed at any time during the rebuttal. To raise a point of order, the debater shall state point of order. Time should be stopped. The debater then has 15 seconds to explain why an argument made by the opposing team is new. The opposing team has 15 seconds to respond. Once a response is finished, time should immediately resume. Debaters should not use point of orders as a tactic to disrupt their opponent's speech. Okay, so I did have a few POOs in the last tournament that I judge. And so all the students do their POO, and then they're looking at me. So here's the best way to answer POO. I'll take it under consideration. Let's move on. So just remember, you're the judge in charge. You will indeed take it under consideration. You can look at your notes, and that can be a part of your ballot process, but there's no need for you to go back and forth with students about whether you agree that that was a POO, whether you think that was a new argument or not. I'll take it under consideration. Let's move on, okay? POIs, I told you about those. So the POIs are only allowed in those first 4 speeches. Okay, here's one more thing to remember. Students cannot do a POI in the first minute or the last minute of the person's speech. So if you're in your first minute, I'm not allowed to raise my hand or stand up or say POI, and I'm not allowed to do that in the last minute as well, okay? Most of the students know this, but like I said, there will be novices, and there will be, it will sometimes get messy, and that's okay. You can help them through that process while you're timing. And as you gain experience as a judge, you can, after their first minute, you could put a 1 up there and just let everybody know that 1 minute has elapsed. So that's kind of up to you, but you're not required to do that at all. And so just remember that and just encourage the students as they're learning this process. Okay. I think that might be it for everything. Here's a little bit more about the evidence that I talked to you about. And so, yeah, students have to write down on paper the evidence, the citation, the exact quote. And so that didn't come up for me in the last tournament that I judged, but it could. And if it does, students should have that citation and that entire quote written out on paper. And on Zoom, they can show it on the screen so that everybody can see where that citation is and where it came from and what the exact quote is. And that can be made like as a request from another team as a POI. So in blue, our CHASA rules do not allow debaters to ask judges to do research on their own after the round to make a decision. This is considered judge intervention. So you don't have to call for the evidence on that. You can consider the evidence, and then if you don't buy the evidence, you can consider whether the other team responded to that evidence and made a claim against the evidence, and then you can bring that into your decision-making process. But it hasn't been an issue in any times that I've judged, but now you know if it is, that's what it should look like written out on a piece of paper. Okay, so there's parley debate, and it's a fun debate style to judge, and it's a pretty fast moving debate. Like I said, there's no prep time in the round, there's less evidence, and you have that wide range of topics. So, yep. And then also just one last thing, I'm on the Remind now. And my name's Hugh Corkery, and I also coach at Oak Ridge. So you're more than welcome to send me a question on the Remind or send me an email, no problem at all. Not only like now, but anytime this entire season, because I'll be in the parley room with our students. Okay, thank you.
Okay, here now, guys, I appreciate you sitting through what I would call speed dating speech and debate style, right? So hopefully you heard a couple of events. You're like, ooh, I would like to hear more from them. But all of these slideshows, we're going to be posting on our CVFL website. So if after, maybe 2 hours, you started to sound like you heard Charlie Brown's mom speaking, the wah, 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 wah. We get it. What we're trying to do is expose you to the nuances of each event in waves. So Hugh, if you'll share that slideshow with me, I'm going to put all these on our website under a new judging page, but we're going to revisit some of these things on our debate. No, you're not going to sit through another 2-hour training. What this means is that we're going to go over the basics of filling out ballots, where to locate timers, and the rules for your event. They should be all in tab room. So when you go to a PF round, if you get assigned one, and you're, oh God, is this one where they're allowed to talk to each other in the first few minutes or not? It'll all be on a column of your screen with the quick rules and the quick timing, okay? One thing I wanted to bring up about Hugh's event with Parley is they are released. He gives them the topic, and then they're released to the round. So that might be the one room where you go and your contestants don't show up as quickly as you might think because they haven't been released from their room just yet, or there's a small delay. Overall, some quick things for all the events. Sources are generally not shared with the judges. They are talked about. They are used. The students will often share these sources or be asked to share these sources with each other. So if I brought up something like all 400 million Americans love pineapple on pizza. First off, it's gross, so it's not true. Second of all, there's not 400 million Americans. So there's something suspicious about that fact, right? And I might say, according to Newsweek, well, if the other team doesn't ask for it, that's sloppy debating on their end for not questioning that. They may ask, can I see the source? And the students will exchange that link over the chat to each other. So that is the investigation of sources. Generally speaking, you do not need to investigate and should not investigate those sources. Can family members join? And honestly, we're working that one out over the last week. We're working on guidance. Our biggest concern right now is if we open up rooms, anybody could get those passwords at that point, and we want to make sure we don't get Zoom bombed, if you get where I'm going with that. We don't want interruptions in the rounds, so we're looking at that. We haven't made our final decision. Right now, they're closed to protect the integrity of the event. But we know that students grow from watching each other, and for speech rounds, they would all be allowed to watch. So if you're a first speaker in a speech round, you could watch the other 5 competitors. But we also like to watch other events too, right? To see how the students are doing, to maybe watch our own student. So we're working on that. I'll try to have an answer for this first tournament, but that may change also. So we may say lock for the first one. We may open them for the second, okay? Violations. You are not the police. What I need you to do in your tab room report is if something happens, tell me. So if you're thinking a rule was violated, tell us in the tab room in your responses. Use the remind app and say, hey, Stinson, before I send this, I had a kid go 4 minutes over. What do I do? Generally speaking, I don't want you to do anything. I want you to tell me. And we'll take care of any penalties on our end with any ballot, okay? So you be the adult in the room, the reporter, and let us worry about what that means. And that should help you also feel more fair. So I'll still tell you, tell me, mark that they went over, and then still judge who is the best speaker or who is the best debater, okay? There is a link I want to share really quick. For Hugh's event, Hugh's is the unique event, right? And I was glad he pointed out in his event, they have to have written it down because they're not supposed to really have a lot of sources. But all the other events that are debate where there's not limited prep, they should have their sources. Now, some best practices real quick, guys, before I let you go. I would like you to run updates on your computer the night before. Please don't try to log on at 9 o'clock for a 9 o'clock judging session and then realize you got updates and all kinds of issues. Check your computer the day before. Then make sure you got the right wireless network before you join the thing. Log into tab half an hour at least ahead of time. I don't care if you're in the room and nothing happens. There was a parent who was here half an hour early. Great. They had their screen off, mute. They were just making sure they could log in. Earbuds are a great way to cancel out your family's noise. Your old cats like me to make sure they're not meowing. Once you've checked in, please go to the judge's lounge so that I can help you with individual questions. And then when a round is ended, please make sure that you put your feedback and go back to the judge's lounge in case I need to ask any questions from you, because that does happen. We get a ballot and we're like, oh, wait, Brandon, tell me about blah, blah, blah. We're not sure about what you meant in that situation. And then you can tell me without there being a problem. We're aware this is a lot to dump on you guys, and we do appreciate you your patience. And then so know that the rest of the stuff on our agenda, I'm going to leave that for you to read on your own time. We'll talk about dress code and such and bias next time. I put in some frequently asked questions about overall competition in our league in case you have questions that maybe weren't for this. Is there anything you guys feel that I have not covered that would stop you from feeling like you could jump in on Saturday and begin judging? I'll give a second for that. If you feel that you are comfortable in what you have learned today enough to read through this packet and you're like, I think I'll be okay, I would like to invite you to enjoy the rest of your weekend and leave and get out of here. If you have lingering questions that are just for you, please feel free to stay behind and I will leave this open. I will also post this on our website. So if you know you need to watch things again or you've got family or friends that should watch it, no, it will be there probably before the weekend is over. Okay, guys, thank you so much for your time. And I hope you have a good weekend.
Hey, Josh.
Yes.
So do you know when we did the in-person tournaments and we had that little cheat sheet for judges? It kind of looked like it was about this long. And are we transferring that to digital at all, or?
That's going to be our plan. Brock and I are going to be looking at that this week to see what can we put into Tab Room to make it easy. A lot of it may just be links to our CVFL judge page,
Yeah.
where all these little presentations and slideshows will be. So that if I was going to judge Parley, I'm like, oh, that was a lot of information. Where's all the individual rules? To be able to just to go to a quick link to your slideshow would be gold. So Mike says, are we our first time judging? Are we paired with someone for the first time, or are we alone from the start? Generally speaking, for rounds like PF and LD, you are alone. When we go to finals rounds, that's when you will have oftentimes a 3-panel judge, but Congress is, I believe, a 3-judge event. If you feel a little nervous, you could always ask your coach, Mike, to try to put you in there with novice, where that means that there's lower stakes for everybody. Try to be a novice judge for a novice event. Oh, absolutely. Read the guide, and we'll put the slideshows up, and we'll try to make all that as present as we can.
I have a question.
Sure.
My question is, can you submit your ranking and then later submit your comments?
Generally speaking, that we allowed you to do that in the. We allowed you to do that in the other tournaments. I have to look for that for this one. I actually don't know if I have an answer for that because I've never done that. I've always been able to do it at the same time. Hugh, do you know? Have you been able to go back and do your reason for decision later?
Okay, so here's how that works. So when you're entering in, as you say, your rankings for the students in speech, or you're giving a decision on the debate, Tab Room now has you have a minimum word count of feedback before they will allow you to submit your ballot. I think that's a setting our league can add or subtract, but yeah, most likely you're going to have a minimum amount of words for feedback before it allows you to submit your ballot. But then after that, you can go in and add more feedback. You can go in and edit that feedback and give a lot more. So yeah, the option is going to be there regardless for you to go back and add feedback. But I do think we may see like a minimum number of words that have to go with the decision.
Good. I agree with that. Now that I think about it, the NSBA require a minimum number. I just already had my feedback ready. So going back and it's good. Okay. Thank you for that question. That's a good one. I'll kind of watch out for that. And so what I did at National was I actually had my notes open and was just kind of typing in notes as I had them, and I copy and pasted. I did a quick Command All and put it into my reason for decision. If you are volunteering independently and not with a team, is the process different? Yes. Brandon, you'd want to email us. I'm not sure how you'd get put in the judges pool if you weren't attached to a team. And just because you're with that team doesn't mean you're never judging those contestants. So if you're not attached to a team, like you don't even have a horse in the race, and you're just volunteering to use wherever, email us. It's oh gosh, what is it? Hold on, let me pull, I don't email very often, so let me pull my email address for CVFL. It's on our website. Do you remember our email address? I don't off the top of my head. I am looking. Give me just a moment here. Here we are. Our email address right now. If you email me, if that's the case, we'll figure out where to put you. CVFLSPD@gmail.com is our team email address. And if you do email us that, then we can always put you. Maybe we may have to assign you to a school, but it may be like the lowest entry school, so we have the highest diversity of judges. So that could be what we do. Well, independent judges are gold because we can put them anywhere. we don't mind that at all. Any other questions from anybody else? These have all been great so far. Okay, I'm going to stop recording then. and then any other random questions can be fine.